A fun graduation trip can turn into a disaster in the blink of an eye. The ship was caught in stormy weather and the crew, trying to calm the passengers, asked them to leave the deck as soon as possible. The storm is coming too fast. Students should run away and climb into the cabin. The guy grabbed his head, not understanding why he was getting so much strange knowledge into his head. Perhaps it was imagination. He even got the knowledge of the coconut into his head for the book. It was a gift from the system and could be implanted into his mind. Snakes and beasts come one after another, but he had a dagger from the beginning, as the protagonist is supposed to survive on a deserted island. When he was fascinated by Master De, he bought the same model on a whim and never used it, or even thought it would come in handy. Apparently, thanks to this life preserver, he didn't die at sea and ended up on a desert island. Generally, after a shipwreck, a rescue team is dispatched only after the missing persons have been identified. Suddenly he met a girl there, though there was not a single human soul before, having to work together, offensive and retreating. A confrontation between the modern and the primitive. I wonder if they can get out. The school's top student, Gao Qinyu, is about to confess to their school goddess, Elin. He sat down on his knee in front of the entire liner audience supporting him and asking her to agree to marry him. The boy is not only handsome, but talented and has a high scholarship, and she's very good. The crowd was discussing them vigorously. Someone even joked that if it had been the Titanic, they would have all died in that ocean. At this time, our hero stood behind the crowd, not at all interested in what was going on, and watched the video blogger. After he finished watching, he reached out and smiled, because no matter how much he watched, he was never bored, because Master De's shows are very interesting. And at the same instant something terrible began to happen. The ship was caught in stormy weather. He was annoyed that someone remembered the Titanic, and it was too late to head for the cabins. Qin Tian rushed off somewhere. Not even the shouts of someone in the crowd asking him to return to the cabin stopped him. As soon as he managed to run to the lifeline and grab it, the ship sank immediately. After the crash, the guy's survival system was activated. In a situation like that, it makes sense. System boot is complete, but the host is unconscious, so the rookie package is put on hold. After a while, he opened his eyes wide and jumped up, at first not realizing where he was. But most importantly, Qin was alive. The search party should find this place in 5 days, so he'll have to live on this island for at least 6 days. Luckily, the place happened to have a lot of coconut trees, meaning he could live there for over a week. He tasted one coconut, and it was so old that it would take about 5 of them to normally shut down the body's needs. That's when he remembered that before he woke up, he had heard some sort of system and he definitely hadn't dreamed it. As soon as he thought about it, a screen opened up in front of him and offered to open the rookie packet. He was so surprised, he spit out the small amount of milk he had in his mouth, surprised by the 3D projection. He was interested in this screen and poked at the gift, whereupon he received congratulations on acquiring the usual plants and animals. He thought the system was mocking him. How on earth was he going to read books on the island when it was about his survival? Qin had a sudden headache, thus the master had successfully obtained a rookie package. He was constantly receiving new knowledge straight to his head, whether it was information about plants or animals. Suddenly, he heard a scream in the distance, which was strange because he thought he was alone on this island. He quickly ran in the direction of the screams, waving his fists as he passed through the bushes just in case. As he walked through them, he saw a half-naked, frightened Elin, covering herself with her dress, upon which a snake was crawling. It is poisonous and lives in mountainous areas, near ponds, swamps, rice fields, ditches and in muddy areas. The girl was terrified and tearfully asked the newly arrived Qin Tian to save her. Preparing his hand for a grab, the guy reached for the snake and despite the fact that it hissed, tried to grab it. He managed to catch the snake, on the first try, by the tail and slam it against a tree. It is very poisonous. If it bit a girl, at best she would be left crippled. Elin recognized him, and was just about to ask him about his identity when he suggested she get dressed first. She got embarrassed, and yelled at him to close his eyes and turn away. She wasn't dressed after all. The girl was like this because she wanted to hide behind the trees to take off and dry her clothes. She didn't think such an embarrassing situation could happen, and Qin turned out to be a good guy who saved her. The thought even slipped in that she was so ugly since he wouldn't even look at her, and left so quickly. After getting dressed, Elin walked out to him, smiling embarrassedly, thanked him and introduced herself. saying she was at university. He introduced himself back and immediately the girl grabbed his hands and shouted joyfully because she wasn't the only one so unlucky, shipwrecked. Qin was cutting up coconuts, giving the girl to drink them. She seemed to need more water than the guy. He wondered if she had anything with which to contact the outside world, but when she was washed ashore, her belongings were gone. She felt that after such a major accident in which so many people died, a search team should definitely be sent out. If we wait there, there's a chance of being saved. She seemed overly optimistic, which is not typical of girls in these situations. He decided to back her up by telling her that the rescuers were probably on their way, but just in case they needed to prepare a fire for the night, for protection. Remembering that horrible snake that had attacked her, she agreed with his idea. The only thing left was to figure out how to do it. It takes some skill to chop wood. There is the option of walking along the beach in hopes of finding something useful. After an hour, they realized that the beach was very clean and they never found anyone during that time. At first glance, there is only forest and sand on the island, no trace of human presence, as if the island is isolated from the rest of the world. Suddenly the girl noticed something in the sand. Digging, she saw a plastic bottle. Only she wanted to throw it away. The guy immediately stopped her, because this thing could very well come in handy. She didn't understand how the thing could be useful, but he immediately showed her how to use it to start a fire. According to statistics, on average, there are very many fires each year. Among them, the vast majority are caused by human error, only 1% by natural causes. It should be noted that while excluding fires caused by improper fire handling, many occur due to human negligence. These are accidental fires resulting from improper disposal of plastic bottles. The reason is that a plastic bottle filled with water acts like a magnifying glass at a certain angle, focuses the light passing through it, and ignites the dry leaves, Qin told Qin while demonstrating it to Elina. Night came on, and they warmed themselves by the fire they had made during the day, taking care to have sticks to keep it going. For some reason the girl was depressed today and afraid of starving to death here. Maybe she was just tired of looking for supplies. When surviving, the most important thing is to always be positive, because if a person is depressed, you can say they are already dead. It will take the rescuers about 3 days to find the place. At worst, they will stay on the island for a week. You don't have to worry about food. There are a lot of coconuts here, and even if you drink only their milk, you can definitely live for a week. Although he wasn't sure about what he said, Qin had to reassure the girl anyway. Qin Tian took the snake he had recently saved the girl from and his knife, which scared her a bit. Carefully, he slit open the belly of the snake after cutting off its head and proceeded to strip it. Elin was shocked, to say the least, and couldn't believe her eyes that he was going to roast it on the fire. He congratulated her for having the right idea and asked if she was happy because they would finally be eating meat. She was outraged, shouting that even if she starved to death or drowned in the sea, she would not eat snake meat. He didn't like that she was so squeamish. He should be glad there was at least food on the island, but it was unlikely she could starve for long. Qin started to eat purposely loudly, saying what kind of meat, crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. The girl kept refusing and he never stopped teasing her. She couldn't stand it, and yelled for him to stop doing it. She did agree to eat it after all. Apparently his plan was very well thought out and worked well. Sniffing, she noted that it smelled quite appetizing. Even lucky they had gotten this snake, or they would have had to starve at night. While the guy was eating, thinking about the system, it had turned off today for some reason and he didn't know how to turn it back on. But just when I thought of her, she immediately appeared with 1,000 points for starting a fire. From surprise, Qin even spit out a piece, which surprised Elina and caused her to ask questions. He brushed it off by lying that a bug had gotten under his shirt, and Qin realized he was the only one who could see this system. Looking through that screen at the guy, she exhaled because she had time to think that something was up. The two of them got to this island together, and people are unpredictable, and during that day he never realized what kind of person she was. If he told her about his system, she might blab to someone, and he didn't really want to be turned in for experiments, so it was better to keep that secret. He decided that as long as the girl couldn't see the system, he didn't need to worry, and should just act normal. It wasn't hard to understand the online game system, but he didn't quite yet have an idea of what he could exchange his 100 points in the store for. It seems to be produced by the brain because it appears as soon as the guy remembers it. There are no descriptions of the items, but from their names you can tell what they are for. He noticed one book that he thought was really cool, but cost a whole 10,000 points. But who thought of putting it in there? He's unlikely to buy it. Plus it doesn't even show the cover. Everything in the store is very expensive. The cheapest item costs 2,000, so with his 100, he will not be able to buy anything. Oh, and there's no task list on the main page, so he doesn't know how to earn more points. Looks like he'll have to explore on his own. With coconuts they can survive until the rescue team arrives, but they only contain carbohydrates. You have to get protein somewhere. To satisfy human needs, he suggested we split up and pick up discarded fish and shrimp tomorrow at low tide. Looking at the sleeping Elina, he figured she didn't fear him much, so she fell asleep like that. In the middle of the night, Qin woke up shivering from the cold, not understanding why it had gotten so drastically colder. He noticed that the girl had shrunk into a fetal position and was also shaking from the cold. Her body is cold, probably because she is very tired. She is so hypersensitive to the outside world that she doesn't wake up in time. He put his hand on her, then woke her up. He was pleased that she wasn't shocked from the cold. When she realized the guy was hovering over her before she was fully awake, she jumped away from him, asking what he was doing. He started making excuses. She had gotten it all wrong and she thought he was a good man, and he shouldn't have to think about it, even though there were 2 of them on the whole island. Abruptly standing up, he moved away from the fire, calling her over there as well if she didn't want to freeze to death. Exhaling, she noticed the steam from her mouth and sat down by the fire as well. Oddly, the difference in temperature between day and night was contrary to science. The worst part is that they are close to the equator. Even though it's warm, Elin and Qin don't have enough clothes. The current temperature is too low, so he figures it's better to hug each other to maintain the temperature, to survive the night. She flatly refused, and they continued to sit by the night fire, her hands and feet still cold and almost numb. The girl apparently has to cuddle with him to get through the night, but she hasn't been this close to guys before. After pondering some more, she realized that if it wasn't for Qin Tian, there wouldn't even be a bonfire here, so she agreed. Elin asked, turning away and not looking. She was shivering from the cold, and also very embarrassed. He looked at her very surprised, not understanding why she was starting to undress when the weather was already freezing. She explained that on TV, everyone took off their clothes to protect themselves from the cold. Qin made it clear that they did so because their clothes didn't conduct heat well and there was a lot of it. But their clothes are thin, so there's no need to do that, so they started getting ready for their plan, and he warned her that he would do it now. He planted her in front of him, hugging her from behind, which made both of them embarrassed, but they had no other options. Morning came, the sun came out from behind the horizon then woke them up. In this position they slept the whole night. She jumped up happily when she saw that it was already dawn. She looked quite sleepy. Qin jumped up and ran to the shore because it was just the time of low tide and the discarded shrimp and crabs needed to be caught. While the guy was picking crabs, Elin tried to help him, but she wasn't very good at it and asked for help. Her finger was grabbed by a crab with its claw. The guy offered to use a rock and hit it on the shell. Joyful, but with tears in her eyes from the pain, she was able to catch one crab, while Qin had a whole bunch in his shirt. He gently prodded the shell with a knife to remove the excess, but the girl didn't like it. She was embarrassed that he was throwing away the shells, which is a waste, because they have a lot of meat in them, which should be delicious. Ate a snake yesterday. She wasn't full and got hungry quickly. The guy said she could eat the shells if she wanted to. She didn't understand why at first, since she had caught half of them, but he explained that crabs are cold, and if you eat a lot of them you'll get indigestion. Caviar can also be a problem, but the smell of the crabs from the campfire wasn't bad. At least it would have been better with seasoning. Qin reminded the girl about the night temperature and suggested that they spend the night in the forest, otherwise they risked freezing. She didn't really want to go there. She'd rather build a house on the beaches, but it turned out his idea was better. After all, there is plenty of wood and other materials in the forest, including for building shelter. Plus there is more food there. Before they leave, they need to draw water and make a signal for help so that rescuers can spot them. The coconuts on the palm trees seemed so high up, it looked dangerous, but you have to try. He didn't want to climb, but the girl was constantly thirsty, and those on the ground were not enough for them, so he took off his belt, which raised questions from her. But she definitely wasn't thinking about that. He wrapped a figure-8 belt around his legs, this method of climbing trees he'd seen on TV. The principle is that the rope increases friction, makes your feet stick to the tree. By clinging to the bark of the tree, the The rope prevents you from falling. It turned out that climbing the palm tree was harder than he thought. The trunk was too smooth, his hands would slip. If he was careless, he would be finished. He climbed to the very top. It was scary to look down, but the fruit had to be picked, so he asked the girl to step back a bit. There were plenty of coconuts. There should be enough for 2, plus they had 3 times more water than the ones on the ground. She took the remaining coconuts with her because they were hard to get, and water wouldn't be out of place. He warned if she drank a lot of milk, she would vomit and have diarrhea, and she would be tormented in the bush surrounded by snakes, centipedes, and rats. She threw the coconuts out of her hands, realizing that she didn't want to be there in that kind of company. Plus, she was already starting to hiccup. After laying out the SOS inscription with stones, they went into the forest as they had planned. While it was still light, they should prepare for the night. Earlier, when he used to watch DG's show, he thought surviving in the wilderness was interesting and even wanted to try it himself one day. But now he would choose the room and the bed, and he was undaunted by the feeling that from all the dark corners a multitude of evil eyes were watching them. Elin asked for water after she drank, handed it to him, and asked him not to touch the neck with his lips. He considered her request, and while he was drinking, she asked what he had been looking for all this time. She noticed that along the way, he kept looking around the bushes, and even a fool would have realized he was looking for something. A species of yesterday's snakes, called Cynoatrix anilaris, live in freshwater bodies and sometimes crawl ashore in search of their prey. She realized he was implying that there was fresh water nearby. But how would he find it in such a large forest? If you look closely, you can see that the branches of the bushes are broken, and so on all the bushes in one direction. If he is right, it is an animal trail. The girl concluded that animals and humans are the same. They all need to drink. It seems that the path is paved by animals to the source. He, sarcastically, replied that she was grasping on the fly and was a good student. She realized it wasn't a compliment. She seemed to be thinking too much. She wondered how he knew so much about nature. Maybe went camping a lot, but more likely just likes to travel while at home. The forest was bigger than the guy had anticipated. If they didn't find the source before noon, they'd have to make a fire to avoid wasting time on it later. Qin Tian began to listen. It seemed like he heard something important somewhere nearby. He grabbed her arm and dragged her after him through the bushes. She hadn't expected that. When they ran out of the forest, they saw a small river in front of them. They were very lucky to find it, and so quickly. The boys were very happy that luck was on their side and they were able to find water before noon, so they would not die of thirst. She scooped water into her palms, but Tian immediately tried to warn her of the danger. You can't drink this water yet. There's a lot of bacteria in the water. But he didn't have time to warn her because she angrily made it clear that she was aware of it. Elin wondered why they didn't pitch their tent near the water. That's convenient instead of going further into the jungle. If they did, they would likely encounter wildlife looking for water. They found a small clearing surrounded by tall trees, without a slope, with flat ground and by a river. This place wasn't the best, but it was suitable for now. For starters, the guy was going to start a fire and find a tree to make a tent. And to the girl, he suggested looking for large leaves around. If there were any, they should be collected. It is always humid in the jungle, so not all trees are suitable for making a fire. They can be dried since you can't find dry wood. Just judging by the sun, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By evening, Qin would have time to build one tent. As they walked, he spotted small, suitable trees. There was a little problem. Nothing to chop with. The knife is short, but the guy quickly thought of a way out. The German program taught people how to make a stone axe out of 2 stones, so he found the right stones and set about making one. Beating them against each other, he managed to sharpen one, but he didn't have time to make a full-fledged axe. He took a sharpened stone and went to chop down trees, so it took half an hour for one such tree, and that was too long. Fortunately, he only needs one tree, from which he then needs to break off 3 branches. He was very sweaty and tired, but in the end, he only managed to cut down 9 trees before sunset. Tian was helping his father plant sugar trees. It helped him a lot with hauling these, with a weight of about 30 kilograms. While he was felling, Elin was collecting leaves, and she brought a decent amount of banana leaves. About 100 meters from the river was a banana jungle. The leaves on the trees are long, so she picked up the small fallen ones. He praised the helper. They would need to build something now, so this would all come in handy. They were short on time and materials, so they would build a small tent to survive the night. One side would be of wooden stick and wall, They also had a very handy bunch of vines. The banana leaves do not need to be stapled to the tree, but can be sharpened into the tree with a knife. Requires splitting the largest branch of the tree into 2 pieces, but first you need to sharpen the stick. Then stick them in the ground, and put a wall of leaves on top of the sticks. She looked at the design and was upset. It didn't come out well. Plus she was confused that the awning only had one side. They didn't have much time, plus the heat from the fire would go straight at them. At the same time the system came out, giving him 1,000 points for building a hideous awning. At the same time, they will feel the warmth, it turns out. Even the system laughs in his face. When plastic is exposed to water, it becomes toxic. You cannot drink water from such a bottle. Apparently she wanted diarrhea, for she did take that bottle from the fire and drink some water. She handed over the bottle and asked for a drink again without touching the neck with her lips. Even though they had an awning and would not die of cold, they had no food. The only sources of food here are seafood and coconuts, plus they grow next to the sea sand. This place is at least an hour's walk away, and coconut only has carbohydrates, and there's not enough coconut flesh to fill your stomach. Tomorrow they would have to go to the banana jungle Elin had mentioned. Maybe they would get lucky and there would be ripe bananas there. Qin sat pondering his next course of action, but he was brought back to the ground by the pain in his arm from the girl hitting it. Turns out they had jungle mosquitoes flying in, and she had just tried to kill one and was swatting them away. Such insects in this area are poisonous. One bite can easily leave a tumor on the skin. The more bites one gets, the greater the chance of getting a fever, at which time she kept swatting away and asking for help. He had a pretty good idea. Whistling, the mosquitoes were distracted by him and flew in his direction. Qin decided to test one thing, and when they were already near him, he threw branches with green leaves to send up a lot of smoke. It worked and they backed off. The smoke would keep them safe from mosquitoes for a while. The old man next door had told him that. The wall was doing its job well and they couldn't feel the cold breeze. Tall trees protect from strong gusts of wind on the awning, but you will still have to be on duty at night. There are many wild animals in the forest. But when he told her this, she was already sleeping peacefully sitting up, which surprised him a little. Apparently she was very tired for today, and she hadn't slept last night, so it looked like he would have to be on duty alone. It's a long night, so he decided not to just waste time and make something useful, like a rope. Morning came, the birds sang, Elin woke up too, and stretched contentedly to stretch. She noted that he woke up too early, noticing the rope, thinking he made it himself. Since Qin had been up all night, his mood left a lot to be desired, so he told her a little aggressively that she should be on duty at night. The girl was exhausted from the night, which is why she fell asleep so quickly, but this night would be on duty, and she apologized. Because she can sleep even sitting up, he wouldn't feel safe, so they would take turns sleeping at night. He was too busy finding water and building a tent, and didn't check the place they had come to see if there were any resources here. The girl pointed towards the banana jungle. It turned out to be not far away, about 100 meters along the creek. While she was showing, he noticed a raspberry bush, which is good for the kidneys, helps with colds and neutralizes alcohol. He gave her some berries to try. She was hesitant to eat them at first, but took them anyway. Ellen's face changed and she blushed a little. The berry was very sour, to which the guy just grinned. Threw out the remaining berries and moved on. These are April raspberries, so their acidity is normal. Finally, they got to the fruit. Looked like a very good and edible breakfast. Its rind was still green. Maybe it's hard to eat or it doesn't taste good, but they still don't have a choice. You could climb a tree, but it wasn't certain it would support his weight. But you could knock them down, with a rope and a rock. He tied a rock to the rope and started throwing it at the bananas. The girl stepped back a little to not get in the way. He managed to hook himself right at the base of a bunch of bananas with this design. He pulled the rope and several heavy but soft leaves fell on the girl. Like a gentleman, he offered her a taste first, but she thought he wanted to test the banana for toxicity. Upset about her thinking of him that way, he started peeling a banana. It was hard. The girl assumed it was still raw and best not to eat it. Maybe just try another one. Whether it was unripe or raw, they shouldn't eat it anyway, and he showed it to the girl. Perhaps this banana tree has not gone through the mutation process, so the seeds are still there, so they are not edible. They won't find anything healthy or tasty in bananas. If she gets hungry, they'll have to eat meat. He was referring to the meat grown from the banana tree, and he motioned for her to come to the leaf and look. He showed her the insect, but she just calmly asked if it tasted good, not even startled. Her reaction is somehow wrong. How can you be calm in such a situation? It was a banana worm. They are usually found under the leaves of a banana. It has 6 times more protein than bull meat. He suggested covering them with breadcrumbs and frying them until golden, which they did in the forest camp. After trying it, Elin said it was very tasty and similar to tamales, such a paste from lobsters. In any case, fried worms are better than raw, and tastier than snake meat, especially on an empty stomach. He told her he was surprised when she wasn't scared of worms. Turns out she had tasted many kinds of them and fish liver. While he was turning the bottle into a strange shape, the girl helped and brought a rope at his request. She was at first confused by the new ridiculous shape of the bottle, but he explained that it was necessary for catching fish. When he came back here earlier, he saw a lot of fish swimming into the estuary, and with this bottle they would easily catch fry. A small fish can easily swim in with the flow of water, but it will not be able to swim back out because of its size. Simply put, it's easy to swim in but hard to swim out. The lack of flow prevents them from doing so. Here came a system that no longer frightened the guy with its unexpectedness, but even pleased, he got 200 points for the trap. Alina was concerned about the lack of a bottle, but the guy reassured her by telling her that you could use a coconut shell for water. It will break if you boil water in there, or rather it will burn, but if you heat the stones and put them in the water in the shell it will boil after a couple times. This way they will indirectly transfer the heat. Now they have to go to the shore for the fish. Carefully set the trap. There are small holes on the bottom where water can pass through to increase weight and stabilize it. Wild bananas will be the bait. This is a shady area where water lettuce grows nicely. There are lots of fish underneath them, so the trap should be placed here. Suddenly, the girls smelled an odor and informed Qin, after which he began to smell it as well. The smell was very familiar and growing stronger. Walking a little along the bushes, the girl found the source. It was mint. Its leaves contain oil that spreads through the air, and it can prevent mosquitoes. Since mint repels mosquitoes, so you should plant it in the camp and the insects will not disturb them anymore. The guy gathered some twigs, and Alina gathered 3 times as many to definitely defend herself. They returned to the camp. The guy, with the help of a stick, he made hollows in the ground, and the girl in the meantime had already started to plant the sprouts. After making one of these in a circle, they sat down to rest for a while, discussing how lucky they were to have such a find today. The girl needs to make good use of this time. A little later she needs to go to the sea for coconuts. As they sat there, he tried to make a stone axe and he eventually succeeded, for which the system gave him another 200 points. He got 2 awards in less than a day. Maybe doing survival tools will get him more points. Upon reflection, the guy realized that doing the daily tasks wasn't that hard. Elin, who sat behind him and couldn't see the system, couldn't understand why he was so excited about an ordinary axe. They came to the beach to pick up coconuts that were recently harvested. But they didn't make it. Someone had already eaten them. They may not be alone on the island. The shell was literally torn off. There is no way a person could do that with ordinary physical strength. Elin had time to panic that it was a predator. But they only eat meat, so it couldn't be that. But still the creatures that eat coconuts on this island are there. It could be the coconut crab. There was nothing strange around but tracks, most likely of this animal, and if one followed them, they would most likely find it. They went in search of him. After a while the trail broke off. The crab was nowhere to be found, but it was worth it just to look up. This species is often found near the sea in rainforests, maybe up to a meter in length, and is considered the largest land arthropod in the world. The girl looked at this crab as a dish, estimating it to be 7 or 8 pounds. She suggested Qin catch it and eat it, but it remained to be figured out how to get it out of there. While they were discussing this, the crab came down, but not for long because the guy took the coconut he had dropped, and he would have to climb for a new one. The girl hurried him until the animal was up again, but he reassured her that it wasn't going anywhere. He won't be able to get away with eating the guy's coconuts so easily. He had a very sinister look on his face during these thoughts. Alina had heard, of course, that these crabs knew how to open coconuts, but she had no idea that for them it was as easy as peeling a banana. The guy fearlessly came up behind the crab and took the already peeled coconut from him and ordered him to open the coconuts further. It's kind of weird that they met him because these animals are afraid of bright lights and usually come out at night. The island really is strange. The next nut he cracked open the same way, in a matter of seconds, and Qin immediately snatched the fruit. He was probably starting to piss the poor animal off by now, since he was stabbing them for himself and never got one. Holding the coconuts in his hands, he teased him, angering him more and more. It turned out he just needed free labor. He tricked the kid and tied him up in retaliation for stealing the kid's coconuts. Taking everything with them, they walked back, but the girl could not keep up with him because the bundles of coconuts were heavy. He offered to take a break, but not for long because the sun would be setting soon enough. The water was receding so quickly, it was a pity it would soon be dark, for he could have picked up more critters to eat. Today is the third day and still no rescuers. Maybe they have already forgotten and abandoned them. The guy looked at her in bewilderment. She wasn't often this sad. Mostly she was constantly optimistic. She slapped herself on the cheeks to let the bad thoughts leave her head, and consoled both of them with the fact that they would definitely be found. The sun was already setting. They had to go. They would hope to be rescued in a week like he said. They came to check the trap. There were 3 fish in there, even more than he had counted on. Apparently there were not as few fish here as it seemed. It's just that the bottle is too small, and we would have caught a lot more that way. The guy immediately started cutting up the fish while the girl went to camp. Last time he put 3 worms as bait. This time there will be fish giblets. He found a great place to set the trap. No need to guard anything, and the bottle can be used many times. The fishing assignment was completed, and he received 500 points for it, as the system announced to him. Now he has 2,000 points, and that's enough to visit the store. While he was doing that, the girl decided to build a bigger stove because the crab is quite large. The fishing tank is small and will have to survive by finding food on its own. Even Elin wouldn't be full with 3 fish. The crab meat is so delicious, sweet and coconut flavored. It has way more meat than they thought, even inside the little legs. She was finally full. Qin decided to sleep first. At midnight they would switch and he would stand guard. The girl was standing with a homemade axe. She was a little scared and worried that wild animals might show up. Suddenly the guy put his hand on her shoulder, which startled her a lot, because it was quite unexpected. She squealed and started waving the axe in front of his face while closing her eyes, so she didn't immediately realize it was Qin. He really scared her. She didn't count on him getting up early, but since he was awake he decided to change her. Since the girl had slept through the night, she offered to let the other half off as well, but he refused because he doesn't want her to smash his head with an axe one day in his sleep. It's a good time to stop by the store and see what you can buy with 2,000 points. You can buy an encyclopedia about wildlife, wild animals, field crafts, first aid, or your answer in the comments. The stones still retained heat, and while the water wasn't exactly clean, as long as there was a way to boil it, there was no need to worry about bacteria. Besides, peppermint is very useful and not a bad invigorator. Suddenly Elin said they were here, scaring the guy by talking in his sleep. He thought she was optimistic. It seems he was wrong. She acts like this to hide her fears and weaknesses. Apparently the crash was a blow to her. Apparently she was cheering herself up like that. But subconsciously she believes they will be rescued in a week, believing that helps her move forward. If no one comes in 7 days, her faith will crumble, and then she may lose the will to live. But there's no time for that now. Qin needs to think about sustenance first. He started to look at what he could trade his points for. 2,000 points for one of the books. But they're all necessary for survival, and for now you only have to pick one. There's not enough for more. Of course, he'd like to have everything at once, but so far, he hadn't made that much. It was a bit expensive at this store. There are not enough tools on this island, and he doesn't have the ability to create something. Should be the first to buy a book about tools. As soon as the guy bought this book, the delivery of knowledge into his head began. He was already ready for it. This book is good as expected. If he can really create everything that's out there, there's a lot of years to live here. A new window has popped up in the system. A wheel of fortune that will randomly give a valuable item or skill is worth 1,000 points. He received 1 free spin for his first purchase in the store. The luckier he is, the more rare item he will get. Today is a good day. First he caught a crab, then he completed the fish task, now the rotation. There are no empty sectors or consolation inscriptions on the wheel, which means he'll get a prize either way. He pressed the start button, in anticipation, waiting for the result. He realized there could be no losing. He got a cheetah speed. He had seen one in a store a few days ago, and the cost was 10,000. Looks like he hit the jackpot. 2 buttons appeared. This ability could be used now or later. He knew that even if pies started falling from the sky, he wouldn't be affected. This system forced the wheel to spin time after time. No matter what it was, free stuff is never extra, so he pressed the button later. When Elin woke up in the morning, she didn't see Qin Tian nearby and managed to panic, turning her head in different directions looking for him. But soon he came up with 3 fish. She was happy to see him and immediately calmed down, but asked him to warn her next time if he was leaving. This time he didn't wake her up because she was sound asleep. While the fish was cooking, Elin decided to step back and asked him not to go lower to the river. He didn't realize where she was going at first. He then thought she wanted to go to the bathroom and asked her to bury it, but she got angry, shouting that she just wanted to wash herself. Why is she looking at him like he's lusting after her body? But she's also a little shy, which is probably why she's only now daring to. Speaking of which, Qingyu could use it too, but he's out of food for the day, so he doesn't care about bathing. Following Elin, he shouted after her that he would look around and look for something useful and asked her to warn him when she was on her way back. Walking around, he found Tritaviki, mushrooms that grow on trees, can be used to start a fire if you boil them. Lucky he came across them right near the campground. You can look for edible mushrooms. Plus the system helps identify poisonous ones. There are so many useful things near the camp. He came across fruits and berries, but most were outside the plant book. Suddenly he heard some movement nearby. Looking behind the tree he saw a rabbit. His speed in the jungle is about 70 kilometers per hour. It's unlikely he can catch up to him or stun him with a hammer. He decided to distract it with his tool by throwing it towards the rabbit and then grabbing the baby. The animal was frightened and immediately began to run away. The guy chased after him, but was too slow, and the prey galloped away from him into the forest. Qin grumbled a bit because this rabbit was running around like Bugs Bunny. He was clearly upset. It had been quite some time. Elin should have finished washing by now. It was worth going back and discussing business for the day. As he looked around, he realized he didn't know which way the camp was, but he wasn't confused or panicked. It was lucky that the dew had moistened the ground, so his footprints remained, or he wouldn't have been able to find his way back. When he got to the camp, he realized that the girl hadn't returned yet. Bathing couldn't take that long. Suddenly he heard Elin shouting from the riverside. Apparently she had something going on. Running to the river, he saw a naked Elin, almost waist deep, standing in the water. She was begging for help. There was a snake swimming next to her. It was already less than a meter away from the girl, which made her terrified. Without a second thought, Qin jumped into the water, covering the naked and completely defenseless Elin with himself. He grabbed the snake. It turned out to be an ordinary rice eel, which wasn't poisonous at all, but it could snag. They are snake-like fish without scales. They can be up to a meter long. They are very meaty and low in bone, so they are very tasty. As soon as she heard that the snake could get a grip, she immediately started squealing for him to get him away. The guy decided not to go far away from the body of water so that if anything happened, he would be there to help quickly. It's great that the food for the day, you could say, found itself, plus he's so big. Probably because he lived away from people. After she finished bathing and got dressed, she went to Qin. She was embarrassed. She hoped he hadn't seen anything extra. When they crossed paths, she appeared before him in a wet, fitted dress. She thought it was cute that he stayed nearby to protect her in case of emergency. He looked at Elin with confusion and couldn't look away. She looked beautiful, something he couldn't keep silent about. Those words drove her into a blush, most likely because it was very unexpected on his part. Confused by this guy's behavior, she quickly removed herself to the camp. She didn't understand what was wrong with her. After all, it wasn't the first time she'd received compliments from men, but she felt joy at such a straightforward phrase. The guy looking her way pondered the situation. He didn't expect to say that to her. Even though eels don't live in groups, Qin doubted that he was alone here. It was a bit of a challenge for him. He wondered if he could catch another one. They dig burrows in moist soil and live there. If he searches carefully, he can find their nest. After searching for a bit, he spotted it. There were 2 exits, one at the top and one at the bottom. The lower exit is underwater, and air enters the burrow through the upper exit. Now it is only necessary to close the bottom exit so that the eel cannot escape. But you cannot catch it with your bare hands. There may be more than just eels in such burrows. Crabs or water snakes can live there, mostly the latter because they can't dig their own burrows and occupy those dug by eels. While at school, he accidentally caught a water snake instead of an eel when he stuck his hand in its hole. Lucky the snake wasn't poisonous. Be it summer, eels are in mating season, and many bubbles rise from the burrows where pregnant females sit, containing their eggs. But it's spring, so the only way to find out who's inside is to see for yourself. Eels like watergrass, and the smell of a human might drive snakes out of their burrows. But he didn't care who was sitting there. He was going to fry him, anyway, and then the grass twitched. Someone got caught. Pulling his lure up, he saw an eel hooked into the seaweed, which he was very happy about. He no longer came to camp with not one eel but 3. Elin was thrilled that they had a food source. It didn't turn out to be that easy. He had to search hard to catch 2 more. There was hardly anyone else out there. They are much fatter than normal eels. I guess it's due to the fact that they live here. The likelihood of them eating it all at once is very slim. But they won't fry them all at once. They'll save it for later. He was going to smoke them to preserve the meat better. Even with the girls' big appetite, they wouldn't be able to handle it in one go. At home, to smoke something you have to marinate it, dry it in the sun for about a month. That's how you get the best smoked meats. But since they'll eat them in a couple days, an hour or 4 should definitely be enough for them. Elin offered her help because she always just stands by while he's busy doing something. He decided to teach her how to weave ropes out of bark, and when she learned she would be in charge, and tomorrow we could make a canopy against the wind. After putting the eels to smoke over the fire, I asked her to heat the stone stove, and decided to go to the river for now. Qin checked the trap. There were a couple of fish in there again. 2 or 3 fish could be caught at a time, totaling 5 or 6 for the day. This amount is only enough for one. If they spend the next couple days eating only eels, they can keep about 10. In that case, they don't have to worry about food for the next 3 days. It's the rainy season and their camp isn't protected from water. If it pours, they'll get soaked through. We need to spend those days setting up camp. Night came. They sat by the stone stove and roasted the eel. It looked very appetizing. The main thing is to take your time. The guy had to add some berries first, for flavor and beauty. After that he let her taste the dish. It just looked like it came from a restaurant. The buttery smell of the smoke and the sourness of the raspberries combined perfectly. The meat soaks up the juice of the berries, the pieces melting on the tongue. It was simply divine. Qin really liked it too. He joked that it was the taste of nature. Too much morning dew had accumulated under those trees. Even my clothes were soaked. Luckily, he left markers in the trees. Otherwise he might have gotten lost. He hadn't gone out for food since they'd rebuilt camp 2 days ago. Now the eels were out. Only some fish left. He hoped he would be able to catch at least a couple rabbits today. A couple days ago, he took down a small shed to build a bigger one to protect himself from the rain. Elin helped him renovate their dwelling, tying up leaves and giving them to him. They built something like a tent. This structure was better than the old one. It was bigger and would protect from water and wind. The guy came to the spot where he met the rabbit with the burning trout, and went looking for it. It is said that these animals do not eat the grass around the nest. But why other grass when there is so much of it around? The jungle has great vegetation. They don't need to look for food in other parts. In theory, where the rabbits appear, that's where they should be. But even with that in mind, they're still hard to find. But he was still able to do it. Usually rabbits make 3 exits from their burrows, so this one isn't the only one. You need to plug the other exits before you smoke them out. He found 5 and blocked off 3 of them. Now you could smoke them out through one exit and wait for them to run from the other. And the trout wood is pretty handy, even if it can only burn for a few hours after being set on fire. We'll have to find more of those when he goes for resources again. He's plugged the exits, and it's just a matter of waiting. As expected, a rabbit flew out of the burrow and he reached out to grab it. It was somehow small. Perhaps it was a cub. Abruptly a second, slightly larger one quickly ran out of there as well. Wild rabbits live in packs. Perhaps there are siblings left in the burrow. Half an hour later he came to Ellen's with almost a whole family of rabbits. But one escaped, so would be full. Today is a very good day. He was able to do everything he had planned. When she saw the rabbits, she started hugging and stroking them while he marveled at how much rope she had woven. He was about to take the animals to the river and kill them, but Ellen objected because they were too cute to eat. Guy had forgotten that women were drawn to cute animals, but she thought they were severely bony and just wanted to fatten them up before eating. He wondered. It sounded wrong, but it made sense. The guy himself wanted them to grow up. That's why he caught them alive. Raising the rabbit to head level, she apologized to him, saying she had no choice and offered to eat the big one today for now. Rabbit meat smells pungent, so you need to drain all the blood and remove the skin. After that the smell is weaker, and it can be eaten. The fur of wild rabbits is tougher than that of domestic rabbits. It is worth keeping it for the future. in case it comes in handy. Elin also noticed that their meat was very stinky, so he suggested she eat the fish and keep the rabbit. Indeed, the meat turned out with a disgusting odor. His theory about freshness after processing was wrong. During dinner, the girl was very content, for tomorrow was the 7th and final day, she thought. He played along that he was happy about their rescue tomorrow, but realized he needed to prepare for her disappointment. Elin had eaten her fill, and happily stretched, and wondered what Qin was doing. Even though they already had a fire, he decided to start it in a different way, for general development. He just wanted to learn a new skill. The more you know the better. It might come in handy for a rainy day. The Fieldcraft book described 5 ways to start a fire, by improvised means. Of these 5 techniques, the most productive is the use of a flywheel, but it is difficult, followed by a wooden bow. So the best solution is to use an onion, rubbing it a little bit. Just like the book says, there was a puff of smoke. He begged the fire to flare up and blew on the lump of smoke, which surprised Elin a little. In the morning, she asked why he wouldn't let the rabbits out. But the cage won't contain them anyway. They haven't escaped yet because they're afraid to move. So he tricks her into not disappointing her early by telling her that if they need to, they'll just chew through the bars. Elin still seems confident that the rescuers will come for them. She lives in her world and he is increasingly uncomfortable with her take on reality. An hour later she was looking out to sea, waiting for the rescuers. He countered that they were waiting long enough as it was. But she misunderstood him and thought he was offering to sit and wait for them on the beach. Apparently they will have to spend the night there, so they need to stock up on firewood and some coconuts to fill their stomachs. He had just learned the technique of building a fire yesterday, and it was already time to put it to use. The girl, worried about the fact that the rescuers were so delayed, because it was almost dark, she even thought that the day was wrong. Maybe it's the 6th, not the 7th, or they forgot about them, dropped them. She ended up going hard again. He wanted to calm her down, but he didn't have time. She grabbed his arm and started screaming in tears that they were going to die on this island. He asked her to calm down, but it was as if she couldn't hear him and begged him to tell her it wasn't true. The guy couldn't stand it and slapped her on the cheek to distract her and bring her to her senses. She was in pain, but for a while it might help to not think about the rescuers. He suggested she cry as loudly as she could. She fell on top of him, hugging him, and started screaming and crying that they would never save them or take them away from here. He stroked her head and reassured her, telling her that it was no big deal. The important thing was that he was there for her. Night came and they were still also sitting on the beach by the fire, and Qin continued to hug her. Early in the morning, the guy woke up to a hard slap on his pec, and thanked him for what he had done yesterday. It confused him that she realized why he did it but hit him anyway. But it was revenge, such were the rules. Clenched his hand into a fist, grinned, and asked me to repeat it again because he couldn't hear. She supposedly abruptly remembered that the water was supposed to break, but somehow that hadn't happened yet. The tides are not always at the same time. Sometimes they come 48 minutes later than the previous day. It's been 7 days since they've been on the island, which means we'll have to wait almost 5 hours for low tide. He suggested waiting a little longer for the water to recede. It's early morning now. It will be noon by this time. A whole week had passed but still no rescuers. The girl was still thinking about it a lot. That said, she can already speak freely on the subject. If she were a body of water, she would have had to deal with a critical water level yesterday that nearly blew the dam down. If someone is reported missing, they're presumed dead after 2 weeks. But she's gone from excessive pressure, and the dam won't burst. If rescuers don't find them after a month, they will reduce their efforts, and in the worst case, they will stop searching. She was a little perturbed by what he said in a not very encouraging way, but apparently slapping her was a good solution. If they can't find them, then so be it. Then they'll have to build a boat and sail away on their own. She sat and watched him very intently, and when he asked why she was watching him like that, she denied it. But they needed to get food. When they arrived, they noticed that the rabbits had already started chewing on the twigs. Had they come later, the smaller ones might have escaped. These rabbits are strong. If there was a big rabbit here, it would have escaped long ago. He asked Elin to guard the rabbits and keep them from escaping, and he was going to make a fire in the meantime. The seafood was cooked, and she called for lunch and to put her business on hold for now. He said to start without him, in the meantime, continuing to fix the rabbit cage. At lunch he asked her not to throw away the shells. They weren't for now, but they might come in handy later. The seafood they collected is only enough for 2 days. Luckily it will be low tide again soon, around noon, so they will collect more. How nice that none of them are allergic. But seafood is a temporary fix and they need other food sources. The guy had very serious circles under his eyes, so he went to bed and again asked to be woken up at midnight. She felt guilty about him not sleeping through her fault last night, so she had a plan. Morning came. Qin woke up and realized that the girl didn't wake him up and had been on duty all night by herself. He was sleeping so soundly, so she didn't want to wake him up and decided to let him get a full night's sleep. He suggested that today she stay at camp and rest. Nothing more needed to be done, she had already successfully handled everything. The tide should be out around 1 p.m. today, but first he has to find other food sources. Finding a food source wasn't easy. He wandered around for about an hour and only managed to find some nameless fruit. Judging by the position of the sun, it was already 9 in the morning. The guy wondered how far he'd gotten from the beach. He was about to turn back to catch the tide, but suddenly he noticed something interesting nearby. After jogging a bit, he ran into a wall of large bamboo thickets. In nature, bamboo is considered a multifunctional plant. Now all those tools from the survival book have become attainable. Every time the axe struck the trunk, the whole bamboo shook and swayed. The force of the blow was reduced by a factor of 3, and the recoil was strong. There are sure to be lots of bamboo shoots in such huge thickets, but as long as there is food in camp, they can wait. It took about 2 hours to get to this place, and the chopping was labor-intensive. It was a shame he hadn't found them sooner. He would have chopped more. He had lost a lot of time here. He should hurry back to Elin, or he would leave her for a long time. When he got to camp, he noticed that she was worried he would be back late, so she made dinner. He didn't even have time to put down the harvested bamboo before she grabbed his arm and dragged him to dinner before the fish got cold. Examining the fish on the stick, he thought some kind of charcoal. It was black. Pulling back the moment of the burnt fish, he said it was very hot and needed to wait until it cooled down. The guy still dared to try her dish because he didn't want to upset her. Maybe only the appearance was bad, but the taste was okay. Taking a bite, he realized his mistake. Still had to lie to her that it was delicious. While he held back from spitting it out so as not to offend Elin, she decided to try it too. After taking a bite, she realized that everything was burnt, and it was impossible to eat, and Qin nearly choked on that fish. She apologized because she was wasting food, but he reassured her. He asked me not to say that. It's okay that it burned. The important thing is to be more careful next time. It's still edible. He offered to eat the fish and for her to eat the oysters, but she pretended she wanted those particular charcoals. This unfortunate dish was making her straight up sick. He kept asking her not to force herself to eat it. After dinner he would beat on the bamboo with an axe. Thus he would make a trap for the fish. She had said herself that the bottle trap was small, and yes, he wanted more, so he decided to do it now. The girl wanted to help, and was given the task of trimming an cleaning it, making holes and threading ropes in to make a water bottle. She made it clear that he could no longer hesitate to ask her for help. If they wanted to survive, they had to help each other. He asked her to be careful not to cut herself. Plus he noticed the girl had changed a lot. She used to force herself to do work and now she wants to do something. That's a good sign. Making a simple top consists of 3 steps. You need to split one stem of bamboo lengthwise so that there is a flower shape. The other bamboo should be cut into strips of equal width and braid the first one with them so that a basket-like shape is created. After that, using the remaining strips, you need to create a funnel at the top to keep the fish from escaping. After creating the summit, he got 500 points. Although the form wasn't perfect, but it was quite good for the first time. At night they sat by the fire. The girl was just finishing the bottle. When she finished she immediately gave it to him to test. You're supposed to put a rope through those ears. Unexpectedly clever design, well done. All that was left was to make holes, which the guy decided to do himself. Tomorrow he wanted to go back to the bamboo grove and cut down some more trunks there. She again, happily, offered her help. Nothing to do alone in the camp anyway. Good thing, she said. He was just about to discuss, because he feared for her mental state and didn't want to burden her with too much. But now that she's normal, he has nothing else to worry about and could certainly use his hands free. She was even frightened by such a gloomy aura and even regretted her suggestion. The bamboo thickets are quite large. When he first found the place, he too was surprised to see so many trunks. It took them 2 hours to get here. Now they can take a break. The place is very nice. If they built a camp here, they wouldn't have to worry about wild animals coming running in. But food is more important now, and the camp shouldn't be moved without thinking things through. Elin will be searching for escapes for now. The return trip will take a long time, so it doesn't matter if they are found. The important thing is to be back at this place by noon. Even without his warnings, she'd be afraid to go far, and besides, the thicket was so big, there were bound to be plenty of escapes. After a little searching, she came across these. The big bamboo shoots are heavy, but there are plenty of them, or you can get the smaller ones. She had gathered quite a few shoots, tied them up with string. They should last for a long time. Suddenly she heard grunting behind her back. The girl turned around and saw a pair of wild boars. Elin began to shiver with fear and reassured herself. They definitely shouldn't be approached closely, and most importantly, not to attract the attention of the beasts. She quickly ran to tell Qin Tian about her find. She felt that they couldn't stay in this grove anymore. When she came running in, the guy was chopping bamboo and was surprised she was back so early. After asking if she was sure she had definitely seen them, he hesitated. The girl said there were about 8 of them and pointed her finger in their direction. He grabbed her hand and told her that they needed to run away immediately before they were caught by those animals. A wild boar, although not a predator, can seriously injure, so you need to get away from this grove as soon as possible. After running for a bit, they did cross paths, and the beasts cut off their way back. But Qin didn't even think that they would be this way. Just now there wasn't a soul here. Did they really come down from the mountain that was nearby? Because of their wild temperament, they have few enemies, but they are prey to tigers. But there have been cases when the prey beat the predator to death. The boy showed Elin on his fingers that no sound should be made, so that there was an opportunity to leave. But immediately one of the boars smelled them, and then noticed them. His intentions were definitely not friendly. He chased the boys and they had nothing to do but run away from him. Soon the whole herd was following them. The boars were too fast and could catch up with them in a couple of minutes. We had to think of something. The girl tried to run because of all her strength, but she was tired and couldn't go on and already started to think about her death in this place. But even if she were to die here, she couldn't drag Qin with her, so she decided to keep things simple. She yanked her hand out of his and yelled for him to leave her here because she didn't have the strength anymore. It even made him a little angry, because they are not in a movie. This is life after all. It was unlikely he could survive on this island alone, and anyway, no one said anyone had to die. The girl rushed him, but he asked her not to yell, for if they couldn't get away, they would have to fight. Qin pulled himself together, got into an attack stance and yelled throughout the grove, trying to scare them. A hunter from his village said that you shouldn't be afraid of a lone wolf. They depend on each other, and are less afraid of other predators in a pack. But in a herd of boars, it doesn't work that way. No one wants to sacrifice themselves for others, so when frightened, they easily scatter. He kept shouting and making sharp lunges, hoping they would get scared and retreat. Then, waving his axe, he shouted at them to get out of here if they didn't have the balls to approach. It worked, and the wild beasts began to scatter whoever was going where in fear. At this time Qin fell to the ground, unable to feel his legs. The girl immediately started circling around him, trying to see if he was hurt, but the guy was unharmed. The herd may be back again soon, so there's no time to talk now. We need to pick up the axe and head off to camp. Picking it up, he thought they were lucky because the axe didn't break, but there was one problem. In the bushes, near the tool stood a frightened boar, which for some reason did not run away. After a little thought, Qin noticed he was bleeding. This was what made him stop, which was not good. A boar that is separated from the herd is terrified and will only become more aggressive. If it feels threatened, it will defend itself strongly. The guy threw the hammer at him, thinking to himself that maybe he shouldn't have left the house today. I guess the horoscope had prophesied that. He needed to distract the boar to himself, and stall for a little while, then Elin could escape. Rushing away from the beast, he yelled for her to go back to camp and not wait for him, and hurry up. He had succeeded in turning all the boar's attention to himself, and now it was time to use the skill. He pressed the use now button and quickly began to move away, laughing at the animal and telling it to swallow dust. Cheetah's speed activation was successful. It will last one day. But this skill was draining him of a lot of strength. He couldn't run anymore and would soon die of fatigue. He wouldn't have the energy to last that long. He could only last 3 minutes. But though he had broken away from the boar, several kilometers thanks to him, he must now fall behind. As his hands were on the ground, he felt the stomping. That fang boar had almost caught up with him. But the guy was already exhausted and couldn't run. He was very surprised that the guy was able to catch up with him. The best solution, for now, was to hide somewhere, and he decided to climb a tree. He hoped the boar wouldn't find the place and that he wouldn't be looking for prey by scent. But while he was thinking all this over, looking down, he saw that the boar had found him and was already looking at him as if to say, "Come down, rat." He chased him for almost 2 kilometers. He was definitely wounded. The guy thought the boar had given up, but for some reason he still kept running after him. It was good that he couldn't climb trees, and Qin should rest and recover for a while, and then he could think about what to do. An old man from the village once said that boars could bring down a tree, but he always thought that was an exaggeration. If it continued like this, the tree wouldn't even last half an hour, but in that time, he could recover half of his energy, apply his skill. Suddenly the boar stopped. It seemed his wound was starting to bleed more, and he lost interest in him. This boar weighs about 200 kilograms. If he can kill the animal, then after salting the meat, there will be food for a month at least. He's barely moving his feet. We need to take advantage of the situation and kill him. The guy's been through so much he can't just let it go. Wild animals on the verge of death tend to attack with vigor. You have to be careful and wait it out when it comes. Having waited for the boar to jump on him, the guy took a step to the side at the last moment. At full speed, the flying beast crashed into a tree behind Qin and lost consciousness. He was still shaking in death when the guy looked at him. He had to deal with him before he came to his senses. Since he is unable to move, this is the best time to finish him off, and he swung his knife. Having stuck it into the boar's head and thought about it, he promised that next time he would have a better life. But the beast was still alive and could even swing its head so that it threw the guy off of it. His skin turned out to be so thick that even after being stabbed with all his might, he remained alive. After a decent amount of time, their confrontation was coming to an end. The guy tried to persuade him not to twitch so that he would die without suffering. It was already too late when he finally managed to deal with him, after which he stuck the knife into the ground. Qin lay down next to the knife and the boar. The system announced a reward of 2,000 points for him. He wondered about Elin, whether she had reached the camp safely. But now was not the time to think. He had to go before the smell of blood attracted the animals. This boar is too heavy. He cannot carry it to the camp at once. He needs to cut it into pieces and carry it in several passes. The sun will set soon, so the best place to start is to hide it somewhere in case others don't find its carcass. Wild animals usually have an excellent sense of smell. Even if it hides well, there is a high chance that the carcass will be found. At this time in the camp, Elin lit a fire and tried to build something with the help of stones. She tried to do what she had planned as quickly as possible. She took the rope off the axe and tore off a piece of the dress. Qin had already approached and asked why she had collected the ashes. She didn't even notice him and answered the guy as if he were someone else. If they encounter boars again, she will throw them in their eyes to distract them so they can escape. She told the guy that she had to return to the bamboo grove to find Qin Tian, after which the guy apologized for depriving her of this opportunity. He also noted that she could have collected fish since she was able to get to camp so early. Elin immediately began to feel him and examine him for wounds or anything else. She hugged him and burst into tears, glad that he was okay, because he was afraid that he would never be seen again. Wiping away tears and already laughing, she asked why he was wet. Perhaps he was washing. He said it was a long story, but he still started talking about how a boar chased him. And at this time he unfastened his belt and took off his pants, which made the girl blush. He decided to tell her later. She tried to reassure herself that they were no longer juniors, and they had nothing to be ashamed of. After he takes off his clothes, he needs to put them near the fire to dry, as it gets colder at night, and he can also catch a cold. He decided to joke with her, saying that she was only so brave in words, and not in deeds. As soon as she turned around, Qin appeared in front of her with his pants lowered and a grin on his face. She began to scream indignantly, feeling sorry for her eyes, but Qin did not see the problem, because he was in his underwear. Because of the wild boars, they could not return to the grove for shoots, but in the top they caught enough fish for food. Therefore, the girl would not want to return to that place, but they had to, because the guy killed and hid a wild boar there. She was surprised and did not believe that he was able to kill the boar, but the fact that he returned alive is the best proof of this. It turns out that he will have to go there again, but it is very dangerous, and he needs to be as careful as possible. The guy was able to kill the boar by accident, and in these circumstances he did not need to risk it again, and he decided to tell her the story. Once upon a time there lived a small family. The father was a fisherman, but one day the sea took him away. To protect her son, The mother forbade him to go near the sea. But the child did not listen to his mother and often secretly went to sea with other adults from that village. A year later, a tidal wave swept through the village and the mother and son nearly drowned. Then the girl picked it up and continued to tell the story. When the mother could no longer hold on, the son swam up and saved her. He knew that avoidance did not lead to survival, so he taught himself to swim. She heard it when she was in junior school, and then again in the exam. If the guys want to survive on this island, they must learn to cope with difficulties, and not avoid them, otherwise they will die. The girl asked how he was going to deal with the boar, and found out how to make a bow from bamboo and kill them. The only threat on this uninhabited island is boars, and if they have a bow, they can protect themselves from them. He asked to check the top and not burn it this time. She, yawning, reassured him, saying that this would not happen again. Qin's skill only lasted for a day. He should return by noon before it is exhausted. It will also help him in fighting other animals. When he arrived, he saw that the boar had been eaten a little. It is not surprising that the wild animals found it. One might say he was lucky that they did not eat everything. They left the loin part untouched, but its tough skin can be used to make a carpet, or something like a blanket. The wounds on the carcass were about 3 centimeters. Leaving them like that, given his tough skin, did not make me want to meet him. The 4 legs of this animal weigh several kilograms and can be fed on for about a month. Don't forget about the materials for making the bow. Qin is an ordinary person, and he doesn't have enough strength to carry the whole carcass. If it weren't for his fear of the herd of wild boars, he would take Elin with him to help carry the meat. But while he has the opportunity, he takes advantage of the acceleration. At this time, Elin was checking the homemade needle, poking it into her finger, checking for sharpness. Unexpectedly for the girl, Qin appeared behind her, frightening her, causing her to jerk and prick herself until she bled. She turned the rabbit bone needle on him, screaming at him and thinking that he was going to scare her, and then take everything she had. Then she noticed the prey, surprised that he had cut off all 4 huge hooves, enough for a whole week. If they spend food a little more economically, they will be able to stretch out this meat for half a month. This amount of meat is no joke. I almost tore myself while carrying it. She asked what the white part that looks like fat is called. It was boar's fat. It can be rendered into butter. The only catch is that there is nowhere to store it. Then you first need to make dishes, so to speak, play with clay, which is what he suggested Elena do. He invited her to just stand there for now while he showed the girl how to make dishes from clay. First you need to prepare the clay so that you get the bottom. It just turned out to be oily and is perfect for pottery. To begin with, he decided to make a small bowl. The Encyclopedia of Field Crafts describes 6 ways to work with clay. Depending on the purpose of the item, you need to roll the clay into flagella of different lengths. 3 methods require a mold or a potter's wheel, so they are not suitable. According to the 4th method, the flagella are curled around the bottom. The remaining methods, beating with a bamboo stick, are simpler than hand sculpting, but are not suitable for beginners like Elin and him. All that remains is the formation of the bundles, after which he showed what he had done. It didn't look like dishes, to put it mildly. Rather, it looked like a heap piled up by a large animal. He hit his forehead with his palm, saying that this is not what she thought. It's just that the clay is soft, and you need to be more careful so that you don't get a strange shape. Qin suggested doing something too, using what he had just taught her. It's just that a small bowl wasn't a problem for him. Apparently, there's nothing complicated about it. He came over to find out how the girl was doing and encouraged her in advance that it's okay if she doesn't succeed the first time. It's not that easy. She had already sculpted quite a lot, but she still didn't really like what she had done. He advised not to raise the bar too high. The main thing is that the dishes can be used. First, it's better to make a pot. Maybe she has talent. Now she will do manual work, preferably a medium-sized one, because a large pot will be difficult to fire. Before firing the products, they must be thoroughly dried so that during firing they didn't spread. Although clay products can be placed directly into the fire, it is best to fire them in a kiln. The first step is to dig a hole and strengthen its walls, and then install a stove over it. Gradually give the oven the shape of a box. Then he realized that time flies very quickly, and now he can continue only tomorrow. With the help of the top they can catch enough fish to last for a day, even more, and they also have a piece of wild boar meat. If nothing happens, then they will no longer need to worry about food, and now they can think about improving their lives. She thought that he remembered something funny, since he was sitting there smiling, but he didn't even notice it. She sewed up his t-shirt, and he put it back on, and he smiled, because they were still alive, and this was still a reason for joy. Nowadays, a girl who knows how to sew is a rarity, not to mention doing it well. They need to take care of their clothes, because they don't have a change of clothes. Someday they will tear, and then sewing them won't help. They can't walk around naked. Well, it's okay. Soon they will change their clothes and life will become better. With the help of the system they will be able to survive and then swim away. They can brush their teeth with ash and chew on a branch instead of a toothbrush. This method is due to the fact that the ash contains alkali or potassium hydroxide, which removes plaque, so it can be used to clean your teeth. This is just weak protection for a real brush, and it is quite difficult for it to clean well, but at least it does not injure the teeth. Judging by the size of the pots they made from clay, firing would take about 5 hours. If everything works out, they will have to wait at least another night before they can use the utensils. In pottery, not everything is so simple. You need to carefully monitor the temperature, otherwise chips and cracks will appear on the finished products. So Elin will need to make a few spare pots, just in case, and the guy will watch the fire and maintain the temperature. A few hours later, at noon, they noticed that a couple of the bowls could not stand it and still cracked. The success rate is now too low. We need to come up with another option so that there is less wasted material and time. One of the pots was made using a special technique. They should have mixed ceramic powder into the clay and molded new ones. There will be less shrinkage during firing and the pots will ultimately be stronger. At midnight it was time for the guy to be on duty, but the girl wanted to finish making the pot first. Compared to the first time, it was better if he was able to maintain the right temperature throughout the firing. This way, they will be able to get more done, and will have plenty of usable utensils at the end of the day. The next day the weather was not very good. It was going to rain. But before it started, Qin began to melt the lard with the addition of water. By adding liquid, you get more fat, and water will prevent it from burning, and there is a way to prevent fire when fat comes into contact with water. He doesn't pour in too much by the time the fat starts to render, and while they wait he can grind the shells into powder. From such a powder, with a little work on it, it will be possible to make soap, which they so lacked. The girl was very happy about this news, and besides, she knew that when mixing fat and alkali, saponification occurs. The powder from seashells contains calcium carbonate, so Qin began to break them with a stone and grind them. After that, he added the resulting powder to the heated fat and water, which would then give calcium oxide. The girl noted that when calcium carbonate is heated, carbon dioxide is released and inhaling it is dangerous. However, its concentration is very small. In the end, after extinguishing the oxide in water, they will receive calcium hydroxide and potassium from the ash. But you can't add a lot of water, because potassium is an alkaline element, so they can mix it with fat and also get soap. In addition, soap can be made from fat itself, because it also contains potassium, and the addition of ash improves the quality of the soap. There is no medicine on the island, and if we get sick, we can die. So it is so important to make some kind of soap in order to reduce the risk of illness. The boar fat should have already rendered, and so far so good, the guy reasoned, stirring the consistency. The girl smelled a smell that aroused her appetite. It was cracklings. She would hardly have agreed to eat them. If she's a pork aficionado, she might actually like them. But if she's not, they'll be pretty disgusting to eat. Most people, at least, don't like them. But the soap will continue to cook until tomorrow. Tonight they can go to the banana field to gather some leaves and prepare for the rain. After some time, the sky became cloudy and it was about to rain. It was lucky that they managed to complete the canopy, otherwise they would have had nowhere to hide from the rain. Qin received 1,002 for making dishes and soap. Adding up to the previous points he received 6,000. Even so, he still lacks 5,000 to buy the power-up. But after completing the bamboo bow, they should give him more. Elin returned and noticed that the guy was thinking about something, but he immediately distracted her attention with his questions about her condition and the work of the soap. It turned out that the soap is not bad, it's just a pity that it makes your hair dry. But at least it's there, that's happiness. Suddenly he extended his hand to her, which contained a comb he had made, in the hope that she would like it. He hoped she would take care of the boar's skin, warning that the meat and fat might already be starting to rot and stink. Making onions, the guy realized that they were lucky to find bamboo that wasn't too wet, but the only way to dry it was to hold it over the fire. There are two types of bows, heavy and light. In order to shoot an arrow from a heavy bow, you need to have considerable strength. A light bow is not capable of shooting at long distances. but it requires much less effort to shoot. To kill a wild boar you need a heavy bow. They can also be simple, from a single piece of wood, or composite, from several parts. Due to the fact that bamboo is not very high quality, it is worth making a compound bow to make the shot more effective. The training said that he needed to give it a shape, but since there was no suitable template, he uses pegs instead. He didn't think it would take a whole day to make 2 pieces of a bow. It looked like he wouldn't be able to finish it before tomorrow. Suddenly, lightning came from the sky, accompanied by thunder, which made the girl worry. He ordered to quickly put the meat and soap into the pots and cover with a lid. Having carried everything under the newly built shed, they exhaled and were glad that they managed to bring everything in before the heavy rain. The rain may be much heavier than they expected, and it may continue to rain until tomorrow. Even though he was able to repeat making soap, it didn't mean he did well in school, and besides, you can't judge knowledge by grades. After talking a little about school and the attitude of the girl's parents towards her, they went to bed. They used the processed boar skin as a blanket, but then the guy heard some sounds outside. Elin spoke again in her sleep, and the guy tried to wake her up, just in case. You never know where the sound was coming from. When the girl woke up, she didn't understand what Qin was doing, but he said that he would explain later. The most important thing now is to fold the canopy. After they did this, he took her hand and quickly led her somewhere because he felt that they were in danger. They found a tall tree. Elin climbed first, with the help of Qin, then the guy himself climbed. She just wanted to ask the guy something, but he immediately shushed her and made it clear that she needed to hide. A crowd of animals was running from the direction of the forest. Apparently either a huge predator or something else frightening was running after them. The guy scared the hell out of the girl, waking her up so abruptly that she thought that some wild animal was attacking them. He confirmed her guess and covered her mouth with his hand so that she would not make unnecessary sounds and would not attract the attention of the animals. So it didn't seem to Qin, and he heard correctly, it really was the stomping of a herd of running boars. It looks like there are about 20 of them there, but 2 stopped under their tree. It's good that they won't be able to climb up to them. Since it is raining and their scent has been washed away, they will not be able to smell the guys. But suddenly the girl noticed that they had fallen. They assumed that the boars were dying, but they were still breathing. Maybe they were pretending like the previous one. They could be finished off with a knife. This is quite risky. Besides all these wounds on their bodies, where they could have come from, it was as if they had been lashed with a whip. In the rain, their body temperature drops. If this continues, they may freeze to death. It is unknown when the wild boars will leave. You can't just sit and wait. He decided to throw his shoe in order to scare them away. If they ran away, they could take advantage of it. He hoped it worked, otherwise he would have to fight them. Suddenly all the wild boars began to run away, which couldn't help but rejoice. But one question remained: why they decided to run away. The animals looked scared. Now the guys scared them. But before the herd of wild boars was running in panic from something else. Qin went down and prepared to catch Elin from the tree. She was clearly scared to go down, but because the tree was wet after the rain, she slipped and flew straight at the guy. Finding herself with her breasts on his face, she asked if he was okay. On a cloudy morning, a system suddenly appeared, announcing that he had earned 3,000. The guy even asked out loud, which raised questions from Elin. It's good that the guy dismantled the canopy, otherwise the wild boars would have trampled everything. But even so, it will take some time to put everything in order. The girl approached their rabbits, and was glad that they were alive and had not run away, otherwise she would have had nothing to eat. They didn't really use soap and it had already turned to mush, but it can be recycled because it wasn't wet by the rain. All the firewood we collected was wet. The only hope was that it would dry out thanks to the sun. The girl needed to take off her clothes so that they could dry, but she refused, apparently still shy. If you take a bath and wash your clothes there, you can save some soap. But this was a weak argument for Elin. The river level rose and the flow became rougher. They were right not to set up camp there. The fish pond, which he had lined with stones, is now flooded. The main thing is that nothing happened to the top. First they need to wash and dry their clothes, but for now it will do. Elin was right that if their conditions did not change, soon she would have to walk around half naked. The girl was afraid that the animals would return today, but he was not worried about it, since last time they made noise, so they would be heard. The clothes were not yet dry, and he invited her to sleep first while he was on duty. It seemed that she did not feel safe after yesterday. Even he always thinks that wild boars could appear at any minute. It was naive to believe that their life would become easier if the dishes were made. You need to tie a rope to two parts of the bough and rotate one so that they are pressed tightly against each other. Then tie the parts of the bough tightly. Then use another piece of bamboo to finally fasten the bough, and rabbit skin is suitable for the handle. The strength of a bow comes from the strength of the wielder. The string should not be flexible. Regular string would work, but it might break. The best option would be boar sinews, but they must first be dried in the sun so that they lose their elasticity. Then beat it well and tear it into thin fibers, using the veins as a base. You need to braid them with a rope and the bowstring is ready. He checked and everything was fine. It did not tear, and the bow was not deformed. All that was left was to make the arrows. The best material for making arrows is the deciduous abelia tree, but it doesn't grow here. You'll have to use what you have at hand. Wood blanks are wet, so you need to dry them over a fire. There are two ways to make arrowheads. The first is to burn the ends of the blanks on fire, and then sharpen them. And the second is to sharpen a stone, then stick it into the arrow shaft, and tie it tightly. But the second one requires more effort. First he will make 3 arrows, compare their power. If there is no big difference, then he will use wooden ones. As for the plumage, for starters, you can use the leaves. For the bow and arrows they were successfully created, for which he received 2,000 points. This meant that he now had a total of 11,000 and could buy one of 2 skills. Once he tried the speed of a cheetah, and it saved his life. But he will be of no use if someone meets him again. Only strength will help. But this will only work in a one-on-one battle. If he stumbles upon a herd of wild boars, then a couple of blows will clearly not help him. In addition, he has a bow that can compensate for the lack of strength. Super speed is still the best option. He finally made a successful purchase of this skill, and the transformation of flesh began. It might have been a hallucination, but he felt as if he had become much stronger. The next morning, he asked the girl to collect ceramic shards and put them in one place. But there was little garbage, and the cleaning was completed in a couple of hours. After the boar raid, most of the things were destroyed and no longer suitable for use. Having already had experience, they made the dishes again. This skill had already improved significantly, and after 2 days they already had a whole set. On the 3rd day after the overnight downpour, Qin finally found time to practice shooting a bamboo bow. Although he made a bow thanks to the system, he never had to shoot, so his accuracy was, to put it mildly, not very good. However, after a whole day of training, he began to get better at it, far from perfect, but okay for shooting a wild boar. The next day, he walked through the forest. Dense foliage blocked access to the sun. Even though there had been a rainstorm 3 days ago, the soil had not yet really dried out. After walking a little, he noticed bushes with flowers, in which there were depressions and tadpoles somehow got there. They looked healthy. Look, a couple of legs have already grown. Soon they will turn into frogs. Judging by their number, the frog laid its eggs there. Even nothing disturbed the conditions for their survival. It was the first time he had seen tadpoles in such a place. Perhaps, if he did not go deeper into the forest, he would not meet them again. If the rain had not passed, he would not have been able to find the shoots so easily. Suddenly he heard some sounds, as if they were made by a wild bird, which would be very good. These turned out to be wild pheasants. After tying up the collected shoots, he decided to look at them. He had never seen this type of bird before, but they had such beautiful plumage. It looks like they will have soup today, and with these thoughts he began to pull the bowstring. But the guy didn't succeed. The arrow flew over the head of the dodging wild bird. These pheasants are so brave, they are not afraid of Qin at all. They even come back to give him a second try. It's much more difficult to hit a moving target, but you can't miss a second time. As a result, he missed several more times, which made him very upset. They should probably come closer. He stood a couple of meters from the birds and began to aim again, which, in principle, should be enough. And finally he got it, and received 200 points for successfully killing a wild pheasant. He was glad that he was finally able to hit someone after many unsuccessful attempts. He reached for the next arrow and suddenly realized that they were out. He had spent too much time aiming. In the end, he only killed 2 birds, but this number will be enough for them. A good couple of minutes passed, and only after that the rest of the pheasants decided to run away. Somehow it took a long time for them to understand. After a more or less successful hunt, the guy cooked soup from game and bamboo shoots. He opened the lid of their new saucepan and a very pleasant smell began to ooze out. They poured the pheasant soup into bowls, and as soon as Elin tasted it, she immediately understood its composition. The girls seemed to immediately fly away to some other gastronomic country, feeling the rich taste of pheasant meat. It combines wonderfully with the fresh and slightly tart aroma of young bamboo. All these notes intertwine as if dancing on her tongue. This meat has little fat, so it tastes better, but it is not very meaty, and after rain the bamboos are a little sour, enhancing the taste of the bird. It ended up being surprisingly sweet, although if they had some salt the soup would have been even tastier. The girl's eyes lit up when she heard this. If this taste could make her so happy, then a little salt would drive her crazy. But then she realized that she had forgotten about the lack of salt on the island and repeated that with it they could replenish the necessary elements. He was surprised that Elin also called herself a student, but she didn't even think that salt could be extracted from seawater. 2 weeks have passed since the shipwreck, and during this time they have never eaten salt, which means they may soon begin to lose energy. This can happen due to fluid imbalances and swelling in the body. Also, the feathers left over from the pheasants will be useful to Qin for new arrows, which is exactly what he needed. The next day, as the guy promised, they went to the beach to make themselves some salt. Seawater will take a long time to boil, so the girl suggested we go and look for something useful for now. But I was going to make a sundial by which they could tell the time and organize their daily routine. The girl thought that they would not be able to build a normal angle due to the lack of tools, but the guy reassured her that all they needed was a rope. First you need to make a square layer of clay and find the center at the point of intersection of the diagonals. Then draw a circle, which they will divide into sectors, depending on the position of the sun. There are 3 types of clocks: equatorial, vertical and horizontal, the names of which make it clear that the difference is in the division angles. In equatorial clocks, the gnomon is perpendicular to the dial, and the clock is at an angle, unlike other types. Therefore, they are the only ones in which the divisions are equal to each other. By this time, all that remains is to apply the hour divisions. For this they do not need any measuring instruments. We can say thanks for that. They are slightly different from regular watches as they only have 12 divisions and must be marked on both sides. Because the position of the sun changes depending on the time of year, in winter there will be shadow from below, and in summer, accordingly, from above. The girl had a lot of questions about the correct installation of the gnomon, because they had nothing to check with. A sextant can only measure the angular distance between the sun and the horizon, and knowing what time it is, this is not necessary. Although it will not be entirely accurate, there is one specific hour by which you can tell the time. Elin was supposed to watch the gnomon when the shadows were shortest. It would be noon, and Qin decided to test the seawater for now. It was still a little wet, but if you continue to heat it, it will burn. The only way to get it to the right consistency is to leave it to dry in the sun. In the end, it turned out to be about 200 grams at a time. But this is unlikely to be enough for the guys for a long time. In addition, it is full of sand and impurities, and in order for the salt to become edible, something else needs to be done. They still had until noon, so he put another pot on to boil. By evening there should already be 600 grams. After cleaning it will be less, but it should be enough for a month. While the guy was talking, it was already noon and Elin called him to the clock and, approaching, he began to level it with bamboo. It was raw salt. It is better not to eat it, as it contains a lot of dirt, sand and impurities that are harmful to the body. Armed with this knowledge, Qin Tian and Elin returned to their camp, intending to filter out the salt. The salt needs to be rinsed with clean water. To put it simply, it should be dissolved there. Then, by boiling, separate it from the liquid, thus obtaining raw material. But the most important stage in its production is cleaning, so the guys made a filter. Using a bamboo tube, we poked a hole in the bottom, a piece of fabric at the bottom, then coal, fine and coarse sand and pebbles. If they had activated carbon, the salt would be better. But for now this is the only way and the filter will take a lot of time. They had no choice but to simply wait for the filtration to finish, and by that time it was already 6 o'clock in the evening. They each took a bowl of soup and adding a pinch of salt, it sparkled with new colors and became simply delicious. Chinese cuisine is famous for its seasonings, and the most important one is salt. Therefore, even a small amount can radically improve the taste of the dish, which is basically what is written on the girl's face. After dinner, Elin reminded the guy that they had been living on the island for almost a month, 20 days to be exact. She led to the fact that he somehow wanted to build a boat. She was interested in what kind, because at least she needed a fishing boat. But first they need to improve their living conditions. This may take years. they must be comfortable in order to direct all their efforts to construction. To begin with, it is better to build a shelter, for example, a bamboo one, so that you do not have to hide during the next invasion of wild animals. It would be better for them to move to another place. After the rain, the guy also thought that living under a wooden canopy was not safe. Although this clearing is convenient, there are many trees and they are very visible to animals. Now there is an opportunity to find a better place. But finding him was not as easy as it seemed. Qin had been searching for 4 days, but so far he had not found anything. Suddenly the sun became too bright. He even thought that he had reached the border of a seemingly endless jungle. Shielding his hand from such bright and unusual lighting, he began to wonder what he could find in this area. After walking a little and removing his hand, he saw a forest clearing, separated from the surrounding forest. It was ideal for camp. It had a wide view, was very spacious, but then he noticed some kind of cave. The guy was afraid that there was some kind of wild animal there, so he would have to get rid of it in order to get the clearing. Qin decided to use an arrow to check if there was anyone inside. There was no echo, but he heard the arrow hit the wall, which means it was empty. Having calmed down a little, he decided to go deeper and saw that it was very spacious. There were no leaks. They could live here. Having walked a little more, he heard a crunch under his feet. These turned out to be animal bones, which means this cave still had an owner. And he was definitely fierce, just thinking about it. A loud roar and a strange sound came from behind him. As soon as he turned around, he immediately saw a large paw flying at him, which he dodged with the help of a cheetah's speed. During this time, while he was trying not to fall into the clutches of a wild beast, he managed to notice that it was a panda. True, she looked somehow strange and was not particularly similar to her current, modern brothers. Qin thought that she was scared and threw bamboo in her direction to distract her attention, in case she wanted to eat it. The panda really became interested and was distracted by the stem, after which she even put her paw on it. But she didn't even think about eating, and in a matter of seconds she simply saw through him, apparently to intimidate him. After which a ferocious roar began again. But a panda's head is usually black around the eyes, and the rest of the head is white. But this one is just black and white, maybe some subspecies. He will not be able to master this beast in a direct confrontation. First he needs to break the distance. Using his skill, he disappeared from her sight, which put the panda into a stupor, and she just stood there and shook her head in search. He went not far from the panda, but she cannot find him, which means her sense of smell is worse than that of wild boars. They would have found him by smell. The guy couldn't believe that he was trying to kill such a beast. But even if he didn't believe it, he had to do it in order to appropriate the cave. Pulling back his bowstring, he apologized to the panda for the pain he was going to cause her, but he had no other choice. This was followed by a shot, and the arrow hit her in the forearm. But the unpredictable happened. The skin turned out to be too thick for a wooden arrow and he had to run away a second time. It turned out to be not fast, and skill would save him. The guy turned sharply and, being at almost the same speed, shot at her in a jump with a stone arrow. Her head was surprisingly hard, like hide, but he was able to hit her right between the eyes. But suddenly, the arrow sticking out of her forehead broke, leaving a bleeding wound behind. This, of course, angered the beast even more, and then it stood in front of Qin at full height, as if her head were cast iron. Suddenly there was another blow from the panda. But the guy was lucky and managed to jump, missing the blow under him. With a blow from such a paw, it will simply be sawed in half. It's worth retreating to the camp for now and thinking about how to create iron arrows. At the camp, after talking about what had happened, they came to the conclusion that in order to melt down the metal they needed a pump made from empty bamboo for the firebox. But in the long run, this method would be a waste of energy and precious time. So he decided to make a fan. It consists of a casing and an axle with straight blades, then it will not matter in which direction it is rotated. While Qin was making the fan, Elin was creating molds for the arrowheads from clay, and a morning later they were ready to be melted down. The only metal was on his belt. It was a belt plaque, which made Elin laugh, saying that soon they would be walking around without clothes. But this never bothered him. Rather, she should have worried about it, which outraged the girl. Having made a simple construction inside the furnace, on which he placed a plate of metal, they began to work on the air. They were actively trying to light up the stove as much as possible to the desired temperature. But the girl was already wondering when it would end. He told her that there was only half an hour left to be patient, and she just needed to hold out a little. But the girl couldn't stand it, and gave up, No matter how much he reassured her, saying that patience is golden, it still didn't help. Elin's strength finally left her, and she asked for a day off and lay down on the grass, as if letting her soul out to rest. The shape turned out to be very detailed. With the help of one knife, she was able to do this, which means she needs to refer to it more often for needlework. After filling the molds and cooling them in cold water, all that remains is to sand them thoroughly, for which you will receive 500 points. He thanked the girl for such perfect tips and promised to cook her dinner for this. While Qin sharpened his new arrows and was also on duty, the girls slept peacefully. After sharpening, he decided to test them for sharpness and ran them across his finger, leaving a small wound on it, indicating the quality of the sharpening. It's a pity that they don't have more iron to make more arrows. With his super speed and a dozen of these arrows, he would have defeated that panda. Having made the sundial and salt, he received another 4,700 points, so he will have enough to buy a new book. The most needed at the moment was an encyclopedia about wild animals. Unexpectedly, after pressing the button, a system prompt appeared on the entire screen. The system offered to buy a set of this book and another one about training wild animals, 4,500 points. This offer seemed very profitable for the guy, after which there would even be some points left. Of course, he agreed to such a promotion and pressed the buy button, after which all the knowledge began to be downloaded into his brain. The Encyclopedia of Animals is a supplement to a book about typical wild animals, so he decided to see what they wrote about. It contains descriptions of fighting techniques that will help the reader defeat a wild animal and become the king of beasts. The description was stupid. Kangaroos are skilled in boxing, so when fighting with him you need to be constantly on the alert. At a certain distance, he will kick the enemy with both hind paws, leaning on his tail, and at this time you need to dive under his body. Once under it, you need to hit the animal in the balls with your hands and that's it. The kangaroo is defeated. Such a strange description greatly surprised Qin, which was something he hardly believed at all. Hippos have a large body and a large mouth. It is unlikely that he can defeat him in a one-on-one fight. Therefore, having met this animal, you need to distract it and go behind its back, without wasting time to dive under it before it has time to understand this. Once under a huge hippopotamus, just like under a kangaroo, you need to hit the balls. Having done this, he will cause unbearable pain to the animal. He will become numb and fall to the ground. You must continue to hit him there until he loses consciousness. Gorillas are one of the strongest animals in the wild. They have a well-built body and their kicks are incredibly powerful. But dealing with her is not that difficult. You just need to tease her first so that she gets mad and loses concentration. At this moment, quickly jump under her body and take aim with a Kalashnikov assault rifle. And the bullets will do the rest of the work for him and that's it. The gorilla is easily defeated. After looking at all these tips, the guy became interested in who wrote this crap. He should be shot himself. He even regretted that he fell for this action and spent his points. Well, there's nothing he can do. Morning came. He was already preparing stew for breakfast when Elin stood up to the smell. The girl was interested in how fierce that panda was, to which the guy said not to even think about meeting her. He could only escape from her alone, and if he took her with him, they could both die. She continued to eat the stew. It seemed to her that every time he cooked it better and better. Life in the wild used to be very scary for her, but now she looked calm and serene. She must have gotten used to it. He only had 2 iron arrows. He needed to carefully tie a rope to them. Everything will depend on this. First you should check with a wooden arrow whether the panda is in place. He fired a couple of arrows into the cave, just like the previous times he had come there. It became clear that there was no one there. Perhaps she went to look for food, but he could look up more information about her in the encyclopedia. As soon as he thought about it, this beast appeared under the tree where he was. Ancient pandas first appeared at the end of the Miocene, about 8 million years ago, with the first ancestors living in rainforests. At least there is some information, but the Miocene means that this is an ancient animal, which is very strange. At first, pandas were carnivores, but then their diet changed, and they began to eat bamboo, and recently evolution led them to be large herbivores. This is how ancient pandas can be domesticated, by changing their diet from meat to bamboo and asparagus. The system said that taming would take about 2 months. It would be interesting to tame her, but we needed to figure out how to stop her. Qin did not want to use the method described in the training books about hitting the balls. There is no way he will treat animals like that. It is better to act psychologically. He hoped that the arrow could damage the limbs, then she would not be able to hunt. This was the only option to change her diet. Again, sitting on a tree, the guy shot at the beast and hit him somewhere in the shoulder area. But this time the arrow remained in it. After the arrow accurately wounded the panda, he pulled the rope tied to the arrow. It was possible to return it after the shot. This is very good. It means everything went according to plan. But after he got the shell, the panda got seriously angry and looked in the guy's direction. As soon as the panda went wild, it was time to run away with the help of his skill. And again, the main thing was to keep a safe distance so that you could get away from her. Qin turned around at full speed again and prepared to shoot at the bear. He did it carefully, and the arrow remained in her shoulder, which continued to anger her. The guy's plan worked well, although the skill drained too much energy from him. He had already left about 6 wounds on her body. If this was repeated for several days, even an ancient being would not be able to withstand it. The next day, sitting on the same tree, he shot him again and continued to anger him. He continued to inflict wounds on the 3rd day. So far everything was going according to plan. On the 4th day, he came to the cave and saw that the panda was not in the cave. She could not bleed to death. The blood near the cave was still fresh. But the guy still didn't even realize that the beast was already standing behind him. Unexpectedly for him, the panda tried to hit him, but did not have time, as he used the cheetah mode. Apparently she remembered when he came and ambushed him to counter his attacks. He turned around and jumped to try to hit her back, shooting her again in the forehead. But she turned out to be smarter than he thought and figured out how to fight back by deflecting the arrow. After which she completely ate it, and he lost one. He urgently needed to get out of there. He was not ready for such an outcome of events. In the end, he only had 1 arrow left. If the panda breaks it, then he's finished. He urgently needed to come up with something, and then he met a blue poison dart frog, whose poison can paralyze and sometimes kill a predator. Venom from their skin can cause muscle paralysis and respiratory arrest, which in some cases leads to death. Like other frogs, they live on the surfaces of large leaves, so he found a way out. Apparently, the tadpoles he saw in the leaves were small dart frogs. He took one of his arrows and pierced the frog. Its poison should help him with the panda. The encyclopedia says that the Indians made their own poisoned arrows that could kill even a large animal from the poison from the skin of these frogs. It seems that he has figured out how to deal with the panda. Maybe he will still find poisoned dart frogs somewhere nearby. It's bad that the rain began to get heavier, and Elin was alone in the camp. It's time to return to her. Coming back and looking under the canopy, he saw a girl sitting sadly, hugging her knees. As soon as she noticed Qin, she immediately rushed to hug him and tell him how glad she was to see him. He was a little surprised by her behavior, but realized that she was still afraid after what she went through last time. The guy apologized for scaring her and making her worry. He didn't think it would turn out like this. She, of course, denied that she was afraid of anything, answering that she was simply worried about Qin. He showed her a frog on an arrow, and the girl immediately realized that it was a poisonous species. Blue dart frogs are, of course, poisonous, and the brighter their skin, the more poisonous they are. Elin guessed that he wanted to try to extract the poison from her and use it to deal with the panda. Early in the morning she held a frog over the fire, and the girl kept asking about taming the panda, whether it was going well. An attempt is not torture. If everything works out, then he will be able to cope with this still wild beast. Suddenly she noticed that bubbles began to appear on the skin of the frog, but so far it was water evaporating, not poison, and she had to wait a little longer. It turned black and began to smell strange as real poison began to appear under the skin. He smeared 2 arrows with it. This should be enough, because the panda is already wounded. If too much poison gets into it, it may die. Elin did exactly what Qin asked before leaving for the forest earlier, but she was wondering why the guy needed these grass balls, maybe to throw them at the panda's head. The guy let her know that he had another use for them by stuffing them into a bamboo tube. Arriving at the cave, he saw no traces indicating that she had come out of there, which means the panda is still inside. He set fire to these balls, which immediately began to smoke, due to the wet grass contained in them, and did what he asked them for. With a good swing, Qin threw all 3, supposedly smoke cones, straight into the cave. Suddenly a roar was heard from the cave. It seemed that the animal woke up from the smoke that the guy threw into the cave. The beast was released for the sake of fresh air, because its cave was completely filled with smoke. His previous attempt at psychological pressure may have failed, but this time he was much better prepared. He decided that she needed to run, since her wounds were bleeding, and she herself had inhaled carbon dioxide. While the panda was chasing the guy, she was very tired. Considering all his factors, she stepped on a branch that was very loud. The wild animal stopped near the tree behind which the blue was hiding. Such a long chase must have tired her, and the roars are no longer so loud. He realized that it was time to strike with arrows containing poison extracted from the frog. Qin pulled the bowstring and warned that she would now taste his poisonous shot. Obviously, arrows with stone tips are not as sharp as those with iron tips. But this is not bad. If too much poison enters the body, then she will simply die. But what he did not work, because the arrows were made of stone, and the animal's skin was thick. He began to run in a circle, using the speed of a cheetah, constantly striking her. He constantly hit her in different places, but only on her limbs, so that it became more difficult for her to walk. The pandas should have already stopped moving and started suffocating. Perhaps there was not enough poison or the sharpness of the arrows. And then he thought of using a metal arrow to drive the poison under the skin and hit her again in the shoulder. The panda managed to get angry and start attacking him. Somehow he didn't think that the iron arrows should have been released in the first place. But unexpectedly for Qin, right during the attack the beast collapsed unconscious on the ground. He was glad that everything worked out for him. Apparently, this was her last push. The smallest part of the work done remains. We need to see how long it will remain in this state. An hour later she lay in the clearing, in the star position, although she was unconscious. By the second hour she was able to get up and sat looking at her paw. 3 hours later, she had already gotten up somewhere, still shaking, but at least she could walk. It took her 3 hours to come to her senses, which means there was just the right amount of poison to deprive her of strength, but not kill her. The next morning, Qin took 3 fish. This should be enough for him if nothing changes today. Fish with bamboo shoots should do the job well. Why is she sleeping in front of the cave entrance? She must be completely exhausted after yesterday. There was only a short distance to crawl. How could you just lie there and show your back to the whole world? Apparently, modern pandas are so stupid not because of evolution. They, apparently, have been like this since their very appearance. It's in their blood. Qin began making treats for the panda by stuffing bamboo shoots into the fish. Suddenly she opened her eyes and growled. She was still inactive and in pain. But the guy was not taken aback and threw her fish and bamboos so that she would at least eat something more or less normal. Suddenly, she finally noticed the food. Her mouth began to water, but the poison seemed to still be working. Otherwise she would have already rushed at the guy. She grabbed the fish and began to quickly eat it, apparently so that it would not be taken away, and at that time Qin praised her. Even if the panda looks stupid, it is still strong. Once tamed, it can help him survive on this island. After she dealt with the first fish, the guy took out 2 more and showed it to the lady. She gladly took the 2 that he also brought her and, it seems, was even glad. The panda couldn't move, so she must be very hungry right now. But in the meantime the guy was trying to come up with a name for her. Giving a name to an animal is not so easy. Even if they do not understand its meaning, if you call it several times, they will begin to remember it. This stupid thing ate and fell asleep, as if completely forgetting that she was poisoned. In the end, he decided to name her Hampy, which means stupid. This nickname suits her very well. In the evening, after the guy returned to camp, they sat at a small table and ate stew. At this rate, it will take them about 2 months to completely tame Hampy. At first the girl did not understand who he was talking about, and then he explained to her that he had named their future pet that way. Elin thought that he was waiting for her praise, but most likely he was simply sharing news from the past day. Suddenly Qin noticed that the girl was not eating at all, and she looked somehow sick. Holding her stomach and writhing in pain, she said she was simply not in the mood. He grinned and suggested that she was having these days, and she was just embarrassed to tell him about it. Of course, the girl did not admit it, and immediately shouted that he was wrong, thereby confirming his guess. She started screaming and getting angry. It seemed he had gone a little too far with his straightforwardness. Lately her mood has worsened, due to her period and the fact that she doesn't know how to be with them on this island. Even though he has never had a girlfriend, he still knows about it. But there is nothing here. She must be in a difficult situation. He started asking when they would start, in order to at least come up with something and help her somehow. Usually the monthly cycle lasts 28 days. She should have started 2 days ago, but the sensations appeared only now. Perhaps they were delayed due to poor sleep or for some other reason. Qin found a way out and suggested making paper. The girl was very happy when the guy offered this to her, because this is a very necessary hygiene product. True, he was not sure that it would be of good quality, like the one they were used to in the city, but Elin supported him, saying that there was not much comfort here and that at least some of it was good. Paper appeared during the second period of the Han Empire, but it was too rough and unsuitable for writing, but it was later improved. In those days, the process of creating paper took a very long time, but this does not mean that they need to do everything the same here. Before making paper, special workers soaked plant materials in water and waited until they decomposed into a mush. Then they collected this porridge and crushed it into paper powder, so the guys need to improve their manufacturing technology. Morning came. Elin was sleeping peacefully under the canopy, and Qin was already actively doing something. She was awakened by a terrible stench coming from a pot in the guy's hands. There was human urine in it. She was surprised by his preferences, but he immediately drove away bad thoughts from her, explaining that it was an ingredient for making paper. Elin began to help with the production and, at the request of the guy, made square frames. Modern technology uses sodium hydroxide. The fibers produced this way will be more elastic, and they won't have to worry about the paper being rough. The main component of urine is urea. You need to let it settle and then heat it until ammonia is obtained. The main component of shell powder is calcium carbonate, which when heated decomposes into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Elin thought he was a genius if he could figure out how to make sodium hydroxide on a desert island. Her task was to pour water inside the vessels in the mechanism that they made for all this. The reaction of calcium oxide and urea to form ammonium bicarbonate smells distinctly, which means the chemical reaction has begun. They won't need ammonium chloride yet, so Qin will pour it into a clay bottle and leave it, just in case. The sodium carbonate obtained by heating must be poured into lime water and mixed. After mixing with the sodium carbonate solution, the calcium ions in the calcium hydroxide solution are released and combined with carbon dioxide to form calcium carbonate precipitates. If they had electricity, they could make sodium hydroxide from salt water by simple electrolysis. He joked that next time they would tape the knife to a bamboo stick, stick it in a pot of salt water and wait for lightning to strike. After resting a little, Elin and Qin Tian went to collect grass growing near the camp to make paper. After a couple of hours of soaking the grass in a sodium hydroxide solution, the lignin and cell walls dissolved, leaving only pure cellulose. They then washed the raw material again in the river to get rid of unnecessary impurities, and as a result they received a white substance. After that, they poured clean water over the resulting paper powder. Only the frames turned out to be large, so they had to pour the composition. You should not dip the frame too deeply while the straining stage is in progress. It is better to move it near the surface. It's 4:30. It will soon be evening, but it's still pretty hot and the sun hasn't set yet. The layer is very thin, so it dries quickly, but the paper is still damp, although it can be removed from the frames. For successfully making paper, he received 1,000 points, as planned. By the evening they had the first batch. Without bleaching, the paper turned out a little yellow, and it was thicker and rougher than usual. Qin was glad that finally, with this paper, he could say goodbye to his worries. Now his ass was no longer in danger. She even choked from such a conversation and asked him not to talk about it any more during the meal, for which he immediately apologized. She praised him, because he was able to make paper on this desert island. He is really very talented. But she didn't even want to hear that he had read it in books and so on, so he had nothing to answer. 3 days later, he again took the 3 fish with the bamboo and prepared to go to Hampi. They sat in the camp for 3 days, and it was time to check how the panda was doing there. Arriving at the cave, he saw that she lay down comfortably and was calmly, peacefully sleeping. But even in this state she still has a good sense of smell, especially for food. Due to the fact that the panda had just woken up, even though it was already almost tamed, it took an attacking position. But when she saw the fish with the bamboo, her look immediately changed and became sweet and kind. Surprisingly, she quickly switched gears. He began to throw food at her, and her task was to eat everything. After 3 days without proper food, she must be hungry. Now it's worth teaching her some commands. This way he can tame Hampi in the next 2 months as planned. Having given her the last fish, he promised to return soon and went back to the river. After 2 hours of searching, he estimates that wild ginger should be growing in shaky places like this shore. He also remembered that after meeting Hampi, he no longer went to extract resources. Ginger root helps reduce fatigue, improve the immune system, and is widely used in folk medicine. Arriving back at camp, Qin brewed ginger tea from a root he found near the river. Elin lay under the canopy, unable to find a place for herself in pain, pale and weak. The guy asked if it's always like this when they come or not, because his classmates never suffered like that. She admitted that it had not hurt so much before. Perhaps the events of the last month had something to do with it. He also tried to find out what she usually does to ease her suffering. At home, she applied a heating pad and drank eggnog with cane sugar. They didn't have any of that, but they did have ginger tea and a bottle of hot water. The girl was surprised by the ginger, to which Qin lied that he found it completely by accident. Of course, she didn't believe him, but she felt so pleased and warm in her soul because he took such care of her. She took a sip of ginger tea, which was very warm, slightly pain-relieving, and delicious. Wild animals usually do not accept food from strangers, however. When they are very hungry, they no longer care what to eat. Qin Tian's method seems very cruel, but it is also very effective. After a month of effort, the panda can already eat a mixture containing 9 parts of young bamboo shoots. Now the panda perceives him as his friend and allows him to scratch his back. These are fresh bamboo shoots. He himself collected them for Hampy and ordered them to try. He was looking for them in vain. Without thinking twice, the panda took these 2 sprouts and tried them. It turned out that they were not even disgusting. In 2 months, the predator turned into a herbaceous one. It's almost too good to be true. Prehistoric pandas may have been omnivores, but it looks like the archaeologists who claimed pandas were carnivores were wrong. But even if she starts eating bamboo, this does not mean that she will not switch to something else. The system announced that for successfully changing the panda's eating habits, he could receive the beast training seal. This was the first time the system gave something other than points. I wonder how this seal works. The owner can use the seal to mark his pet. This connection helps to know the condition of the pet. Most importantly, this connection allows one to know for sure whether the beast is capable of attacking its owner. The guy pressed a button to buy the seal, and it was immediately purchased and pumped into him, after which he took it and attached it to the panda's back, but in such a way that she couldn't feel it. When Qin had already implemented this seal, the panda continued to calmly chew bamboo. She was injured and hungry. The seal told Qin about this, just as the system had warned. Just in case, he once again repeated to her that her new name was Hampy, so that it would be easier to remember. Taming the panda took a lot of time, but now the guy is delighted with his own triumph. They agreed to go meet Hampy. He had been planning their meeting for a long time. Perhaps they would get along. The guy reassured the girl that the panda would not attack her, because he was nearby, and she trusted him. Encouraged by Qin's words, the girl bravely stepped forward and carefully fed her. The food really did a great job of creating a bond with the panda, and after just a week, Elin and Humpy were getting along great. While Elin was feeding Hampy, Qin was also trying to teach her to eat plain bamboo instead of young shoots. They were packing all their belongings from the camp because they were going to move to a new clearing with a cave. Qin walked around the area. Half an hour from that clearing there is a river, but now he is not sure that there are fish there. It's half a day's walk from their current camp, and if the fish is transported like this, it will remain alive for at least 10 hours. The head and tail are tied together. This is called the bow technique, and the whole thing is placed in a basket. When they move into the cave, it will be possible to put fish in clay pots. Then they will not have to worry about food. Slapping the panda on the butt, Qin ordered her to work, otherwise she was slacking a lot. They only had 4 baskets and not all the dishes went in, but you could come back for the rest later or it would be easier to make a new one. The stone slab must be picked up. It is difficult to find the same flat stone. They will definitely miss this place. After all, the first house on this island. Qin hurried Elin so that everything could be done by the evening. If anything happened, it would be possible to come to this place again. And they left the fire to smolder and went to their new camp to meet. The Milky Way stretched magnificently above them, and Qin received 3,000 points for building a new camp. Elin was amazed at the beauty of the Milky Way. It is generally difficult to see with the naked eye. She thought that such a sight could only be seen in such a place. But Qin often saw such a thing in his city. But that was in childhood. Now the air is such that even seeing a couple of stars is a great success. They no longer need to take turns and be on duty. As long as they have Hampy, not a single wild animal will attack them and they will finally be able to sleep together. Unexpectedly, Qin asked Elin if she wanted to become his girlfriend, which confused her and caused her indignation. She believed that he had thought it all up himself, but he began to move closer to her lips, not listening to her unpreparedness. And when he was already close to her ear, He asked if she understood that only couples sleep together. She was stunned and as embarrassed as possible. After his outburst, she covered her lips with her hand and moved away. He promised the girl not to tease her anymore while she screamed that she didn't mean it when she said they would sleep together. He also asked to remove the fried fish, but she pouted and pretended not to listen to him. On the second day after moving to a new place, Qin Tian and Elin dug up clay in a clearing next to the camp, since there were few current dishes. In addition to making new pots, they planned to set up a more proper camp. The river next to the cave is wide, but shallow. The fish are at most the size of a finger, and there is nowhere to put the fish. Maybe there is a deeper place in the upper reaches of the river. He found a place where the river makes a turn and gets deeper, and there is a lot of aquatic vegetation here. It seems there are better conditions for fish. You can also build something like a shed to free up space in the cave. The construction will take a long time, but it will be worth it. It was the third day. The guys were collecting bamboo. It's good that their panda was very strong. At this speed they would collect enough in a day. Qin slapped the panda on the head with bamboo, saying that first work, then food. On the fourth day, they heated the bamboos so that it temporarily became softer and more pliable, so that it could be molded into any shape. They also made a ladder and continued to build the barn. It was not high, so Qin was not afraid of falling. The girl suggested covering the outer walls with clay, but she didn't think that if it rained, all the dirt would flow into the kitchen. A week had already passed and they were well settled in the new kitchen, but they were still continuing to set everything up. They worked tirelessly all this week, and finally finished the construction. There are so many different fish in this part of the river, even catfish live. They are lucky with this place. He was also given 500 points for the ladder and the bamboo bed, and he bought an encyclopedia of plants. After they were both free, the guy invited Elin to show her around. They came to the river. The girl came in to wet her feet, and the water was like this cool. Even the panda decided to take a swim. When they first got here, the main question was where to hide, but now they don't have to worry about that. Times are changing. Now she can even allow herself to frolic carefree in the water. But suddenly the girl felt pain in her foot. Apparently she stepped on something in the water. Running along her leg, she found some kind of pebble imprinted on her. She thought it was rock crystal. Qin said it was quartz, which was one of the components for making glass. But Elin was not mistaken, because rock crystal is also quartz, but with a high frequency. True, what she picked up is usually called just a pebble, so she was a little upset. Upstream the river becomes deeper and the trees along the bank grow denser, but downstream it floods and there are fewer trees. Qin suggested that the girl go higher. There is a chance of finding more resources. Honey locust fruit can be used as a shampoo because it contains saponins. The girl said that you can wash clothes with honey locust, and if you add coconut and ginger to the bean broth, you can wash your hair with this mixture. This improves the quality of the hair. Although soap made from boar fat washes the hair, it makes it very dry. It would be great to have a good shampoo. This tree was too tall and full of sharp thorns, and she did not want to put it in danger. He wanted to collect some beans for the girl, but since she says so, he has an idea. The tree itself may be tall, but the lower branches are only 3 meters from the ground. If you use your skill, you can jump onto them. Living on a desert island, a girl can only ask not to worry about her and just go back down. He said that he was not doing this for her sake, but simply wanted to collect fruits for food and asked her to bring a bamboo basket here. She could have helped him collect beans. Apparently she understood everything wrong. Now she is ashamed. Honey locust pods can only be found on the upper branches. You will have to climb there. It's good that the branches are thick and strong. It is much easier to climb on them than on the bare trunk of a coconut tree, and it also has a rope that will prevent you from falling. He climbed to the top and began to pick beans with a stone axe. But due to the fact that he had not climbed trees for a long time, he had almost forgotten how to do this. Being so high, he managed to notice some familiar vegetation, and it immediately became clear from the leaves what it was. At that time, the girl was standing below and collecting the falling beans in the basket that she had brought before. Some of them can be used for shampoo, which at first made the girl very happy. But then she remembered that the guy collected this not only for her sake, but in pursuit of his own goals. She immediately hid her joy and, turning away, said that it was up to him to decide how to use them. Qin started making fun of her, saying that he wasn't sure if it was worth it, because it was such a confusing process. He probably shouldn't change his decision, because one day he might become an indecisive person. Qin will make the final decision after they return from the large sugarcane fields. When she saw him, she was delighted, and he was convinced that he had not made a mistake in identifying the plant. However, it is too strange that this reed grows in a square, and is also surrounded by a narrow strip of land, as if someone planted it here. Elin had seen this type of sugar cane before, but didn't know if it was edible. The girl reached for the leaves of the plant. The guy shouted for her to be careful and not touch him. But he didn't have time. She had already touched the leaf and received a cut from it until she bled. The guy began to cut down the reeds, but he should also have been more careful because of the sharpness of the leaves. They are like blades, only Elin could think of touching them with her bare hands. It has a shiny purple stem and can be used to make brown sugar, while white is made from the rarer light sugar. Sugar can be made from such cane. Only black or yellow cane is used for food. The taste is strange, too sweet and at the same time sour, because now is not the cane season. The stems gain sweetness at a certain period. Elin realized that he wanted to take them home to eventually convert them into sugar. Honey locust beans, or pods, have high nutritional value, but peeling them is not an easy task. First you need to dry the pods, then remove the black shell to get to the white beans inside. This is a long and unpleasant process. After they cleaned them and prepared dinner, he served 2 servings. The honey locust bean porridge turned out to be so tasty, tender and sweet. It's a pity that they have so few of these beans. A whole basket only yielded about 1.5 kilograms. The beans need to soak for about 3 days, but since they are just taken from the tree, they will be ready by tomorrow. If she wants to wash her hair with shampoo tomorrow, then today she needs to prepare everything for this. She needs to go to the beach for coconuts. He tried to squeeze the juice out of the cane, but it didn't work out very well. Maybe they should have cut the sugar cane smaller, and then things would have gone much faster. In the end, he finally finished squeezing the juice out of these stems, and it took quite a lot of time. He tasted the stem, thought for a while and realized that he needed to strain the juice before cooking. Unexpectedly, while he was eating the cane, Elin returned with a basket and even scared Qin. She handed him a basket full of mushrooms. There were many different types. The girl even begged for praise, saying that she was good, because she spent half a day collecting them. The guy looked at them and noticed that there were pale toadstools, which are deadly poisonous mushrooms of the Amanitaceae family. Did she decide to poison him? Because the fruiting body of the mushroom contains amatoxin and phallotoxin, which destroy the liver and lead to death. Red fly agaric mushrooms are definitely poisonous, and these white ones are also not edible, poisonous mushrooms of the Amanitaceae family with a red cap. Psilocybe semianciform, they are also called fungus. They resemble honey mushrooms, but when consumed they cause hallucinations. And also yellow mushrooms, these are chanterelles, they are edible, one of the most popular wild edible mushrooms. Elin was upset that so little was left of everything brought, but Qin gave her a new task, to collect mint, large and fresh leaves. She thought he wanted to use it to make shampoo, but it turned out he wanted to make toothpaste. The girl was surprised that mint leaves were needed to make the paste. Coconut oil, honey locust and ginger make a shampoo, while coconut oil, peppermint extract and baking soda make a paste. The sugarcane juice has already thickened by this time and now you need to cool it. The guy asked how many beans they had left. It turned out that there were very few. Hot fresh ginger prevents hair loss and stimulates hair growth, reduces skin itching and strengthens hair follicles. He would heat the honey locust infusion, but Elin needed to chop the coconut flesh for now. Turning coconut milk into coconut oil will take about an hour and a half. While they wait you can do something else. They will boil the mint leaves with the lid closed and the steam from the mint water will rise, condense in the bamboo tube and drip into the bottle. The smell is very fresh, so this extract can repel mosquitoes. The ratio between honey locust infusion and coconut oil is 1:1, and then they need to be mixed thoroughly. Tomorrow it will be possible to wash his hair, and in the end he received 800 points for shampoo and 500 for creating a paste. It's possible only tomorrow, because now it's late, and it's too dark outside to go wash your hair. At night, the guy slept peacefully. Like the panda, there was perfect silence, but suddenly a strange laugh began to be heard. It turned out that Elin was muttering in her sleep about clean, shiny and soft hair, which scared Qin. He thought it was a ghost. The silence of the night was broken by rain, which eventually woke up Elin and Qin. She was a little scared, It was reminiscent of the night when there was an equally heavy downpour. Suddenly the girl noticed that something was wrong with Hampy. She looked into the distance with an angry look. They approached the panda and asked what was wrong, patting her on the back. But she didn't even pay attention to them. The guy touched her back and, using a seal, determined what was bothering her. It was a herd of wild boars. He also let the girl know that those boars might return soon, saying that he is not sure, but just has a feeling. If they do appear, the girl will just need to stay inside the cave, and then everything will be fine. The guy felt that the herd was already very close. They were approaching their new camp. Hampy naturally began to defend her home, so she growled loudly and furiously. But she couldn't resist, and despite Qin's screams asking them to stop, she ran straight towards them. She began to swing her paws, throwing away one boar after another. The panda seemed to be furious. She was uncontrollably fighting off the crowd of wild animals. It was a bit of a stupid move on her part. If she rushed at them like that, they might overwhelm her with numbers. But it's still good that Hampy diverted all their attention to herself. They haven't noticed him yet. She continued to fight with the boars until the last, inflicting new blows. She even managed to bite some, but it was not for long. There were many boars, and she was alone. Suddenly, another boar attacked Hampy from behind while she was busy with another, but almost immediately an arrow flew into his neck. All wet from worrying about the panda, Qin stood with a bow, after the previous shot, afraid that he would miss. He had not used these poison arrows for a long time. It was unknown whether the poison still had an effect on them. It turned out that the poison still works. The guy was lucky and the boar was immediately paralyzed. Since taming Hampy, he still has more than half of the poison arrows left. Now there are only 4 of them. It looks like he will have to shoot as carefully and accurately as possible so as not to accidentally waste it. Oddly enough, he succeeded and never missed, killing all 4. They killed most of the wild animals, but there was still someone to resist. But in the end, the boars noticed him, and by this time the poisonous arrows had run out. In this case, he did not find anything earlier than to try to get them away from Hampy. Qin quickly ran in the other direction from the 3 boars chasing him. When he realized that he had led them far enough, he decided to break away from them. After gloating that they would catch him if they could, he activated his cheetah mode. They pulled away a little at first, but their speed was greater than that of the same Hampy. They were lucky that the rain washed away his scent, and now they will no longer find him on the tree. In theory, they should have gone back, but he also needs to return quickly, because poor Hampy is there alone. At this time, the panda was surrounded. While she stood in an attack position, on her hind legs, she was slightly injured. She let out a loud, terrifying roar so that the boars would become confused and lose their vigilance. The wild animals were frightened by Hampy and began to scatter, but she still did not calm down and wanted to chase them. The guy managed to stop the pet, fearfully asking her not to chase them. He began to calm Hampy, stroking his head and saying that everything was fine and he was nearby. Even if the guy tamed her, she still remains a predator with whom it is better not to joke. In the morning, the girl noticed that there were many wounds on the pet's body and was worried that it would get infected. But this would not happen. She was not used to it. Yesterday Hampy was acting strange, most likely because she felt the boars approaching, which is why her mood changed. Perhaps it was some kind of reflex that she developed over time. She knows that boars are more aggressive when it rains, so she gets nervous every time. But on the day of Hampy's taming, it seemed to be rainy. Qin had a hunch that the wild boars and the weather were somehow connected, but it was not yet clear how. They would be busy with these 4 boars until the evening, but they can do it tomorrow, and in the meantime the guy will go in search of escapes. Hampy was very brave and it's worth rewarding her, and it wouldn't hurt the guys to diversify the menu, because eating only meat all the time is not healthy. There are very few shoots at the border of the thickets. Hampy will definitely gobble them up in one sitting. To find more delicacies, he will have to go deeper into the thickets. He walked a little further and either she began to stress herself out, or it was too quiet, which bothered him. After some time, he came across a huge line of trampled grass. This scared him a little and put him in a stupor, because there cannot be a road skating rink on a desert island. Everyone knows that curiosity does not lead to good things, and this case is no exception. If this were a TV series, then there would definitely be danger ahead of him, so he decided to quickly leave there. He began to carefully walk back from where he had come, but suddenly a strange sound was heard. Turning towards the sound, he was taken aback. The guy definitely didn't expect to see this. There was a titanoboa, the largest snake that ever lived, the ancestor of modern anacondas. They went extinct 58 million years ago. The average length of adult individuals is 12 meters, and the weight could reach up to a ton. First, an ancient panda on a desert island, now also a titanoboa, and tomorrow, in theory, there should be a dinosaur then. While he was running away, the system unexpectedly gave him a hint to win the snake. Titanoboa are incredibly fast. In addition, they are very strong. It is impossible to escape from one of them, but it is possible to escape. When the snake opens its mouth wide, this is a chance to jump into its mouth, since they do not chew food, so you need to slide into the stomach. Using a penknife, cut out its innards and kill the snake by ripping open its belly. The guy was completely shocked. The system gave very strange advice. In simple terms, snakes use their tongues to detect movements and determine the location of the victim, so there is no way to escape. Qin ran as fast as he could, using his cheetah mode, and then he came across a ravine. He quickly dived into it and hid, hoping that the huge snake would not notice him. It's good that there was a ravine here. Snakes have limited vision, they won't be able to see it right away. It's a pity that he spent all the poison arrows yesterday, although they didn't even do much harm to Hampy, let alone such a snake. Hoping to find some way out, he decided to look at what was in the encyclopedia about wild animals. But there were no options other than to jump into her mouth. The success rate was 1 in 1,000. If he did this, he would simply die. A snake crawling over him smelled his scent. The guy noticed this, and he became scared. Taking his knife in his hands, he decided to do almost as it was said in the book. There was no other choice. Qin sat astride the snake, in theory, so she would not be able to see him, even if she could smell him. She crawled somewhere, while the guy tried to calm down and come up with another way. An hour later, all this was still going on. He only had a short knife. He considered the possibility of killing this snake to be complete nonsense. So much time had passed, and she was still tracking the guy, although she could have given up long ago. In theory, he can simply run away. The main thing is not to make any noise, but in practice you need to be prepared for anything. Continuing to ride on the back of the snake, and come up with a rescue plan, he smelled something. It was a pile of dung, which is how wild boars mark the center of their territory. But there are no traces of them here, which means they left long before the snake appeared. Suddenly, the snake accelerated, almost throwing its rider off its back. It turns out that she noticed a boar, which, trembling, ran in the other direction from them. Suddenly the snake suddenly attacked him. Speeding up and opening its mouth, it rushed towards the poor fellow. Titanoboa's tracking skill is simply amazing. He spotted a wild boar 1,000 meters away. While this monster dealt with the small beast, Qin had a small chance to escape. The snake grabbed the boar with its teeth and threw it aside, apparently to stun it. That's where these wounds came from on the animals. They already had many similar wounds. Apparently they were all from this snake. After that, she took the boar, using her body, into the ring and began to strangle it. As a result, he had no way to escape, and he was trapped, after which the snake was going to eat him. During this unequal battle, Qin managed to hide a little, walking through the puddles left after the rain. He was about a kilometer away from them. The snake should no longer be able to smell him, but as soon as it gets dark, the guy may face other dangers, and now he is too weak to fight wild animals. Qin was hoping to find something in the system, although he doesn't have enough points to buy skills right now. Maybe there are useful bonuses or test items. After logging into the system, he saw that the skills had changed, but there was still one suitable one. Empty sectors meant that he would miss his chance, but there was horse endurance there. Maybe it will be possible to combine it with the speed of a cheetah. With these thoughts he decided to take a chance and press the start button. The wheel began to spin and his heart skipped a beat every time the arrow passed an empty sector. This time he was unlucky. The only good thing is that it was not an empty cell that fell out, but it was just the seal of a slave beast. He was upset that out of 3 possible options, this, so far, useless seal fell out. Qin took this gift. Don't refuse it. Maybe it will come in handy someday. Suddenly the guy saw wild boars and hoped that they wouldn't notice him, otherwise he would be finished. After waiting a little, a whole herd appeared on the horizon and ran towards him. He was already sweating. He was very tired after all this time and just hoped that they wouldn't understand where he was. He tried to carefully go in the opposite direction, but he couldn't do it quietly. he came across a wild boar. The guy decided to try to use the old trick, maybe it would work again. He stood in a threatening pose, raised his hands up and just started screaming, in the hope that the boar would get scared. Unfortunately, this didn't work and the boar just started aggressively chasing the guy. Apparently, due to the fact that he constantly used the skill, his legs seemed to be on fire. If he continued to run, they would completely fail. He hoped that he was not mistaken with the direction of his run, and that he was moving in the right direction, back to the pile of manure. Covering his nose with his shirt, he decided to hide in a pile of manure and jumped straight into the center. At dusk, wild boars see practically nothing and search for food only by smell. The smell of manure will overwhelm it, and they will not find the guy if he sits quietly. The boars walked around the pile, but did not find him and went to sleep right next to it, so he would have to stay for a while. It turned out to be very hot in the pile of manure. It must be releasing carbon dioxide, which prevents the heat from dissipating. It's as if he's put on a warm down jacket in the middle of summer. Soon he can cope like this, but he can hardly feel his arms and legs. The guy began to feel sleepy, but he needed to stay conscious. If he passed out, he was doomed. It looks like the herd is not going to leave here until the morning, apparently, and he will have to hang around there all night. It's good that the smell of manure covers it, otherwise they would have found it quickly. Besides, this is their territory. Therefore, you don't have to worry about other animals. It's relatively safe here, and such a long rest will allow him to use the skill again. The only thing he was worried about now was the snake. Some hunt during the day and some at night. Therefore, to reduce the risk of meeting that snake, he needs to get out of here at dawn. Suddenly, in the darkness, he saw a fire and heard someone calling him. It was quite unexpected. These are hallucinations. It seemed to him that Elin was calling him. He did not believe that she could come here. He was greatly surprised when the picture was completely revealed to him, and the light came closer. Hampy ran out of the darkness, Elin sitting astride her with a torch in her hands. The girl was worried and scared because she couldn't find Qin. She kept calling him. Suddenly the girl noticed him. She was very surprised by what she saw. The main thing is that she was able to find him. He was sitting in a pile of manure, and around him a herd of wild boars was sleeping peacefully. Taking the axe in her other hand and raising the torch, she screamed and rushed straight into the crowd of wild boars. The animals, frightened by the abrupt awakening, did not attack. They were confused. The guy was, to put it mildly, in shock, thinking that it was a dream. His feminine Elin was so fighting right now. The boars simply ran away out of fear, opening the passage for Qin and giving him the opportunity to leave. The girl asked if Qin was okay, to which he replied that thanks to her, he was doing well. True, he was very dirty, so it was better for her not to approach him yet, but he was alive. He crawled out of the pile of manure, but spent too much time there in a motionless position. His legs were completely numb. Because of this, he staggered and almost fell, but Elin, without disdain, held him. He apologized. It's just that he hasn't eaten anything since the morning and now he's shaking a little. It's already completely dark, he needs to return to camp. At this time, Hampy looked at the shoots with desire, but the girl asked her to be patient. As soon as they returned home, she could rest. They mounted their pet and headed towards the house, also lighting their way with a torch. The girl put his hands on her waist and asked him to hold on tight. They were both pleasantly embarrassed. This was the first time they were in this position and so close to each other. But Qin, as usual, noticed something that would help her survive. This time he noted that her dress could be used as gauze. Looking at the girl, he realized that he was recognizing her as if in a new way, her other side. In the morning, already near his camp, Qin simply plopped into the river to wash himself off from everything. After running nonstop for 2 hours, the guys finally left the bamboo thickets and safely reached the pond. On the way, they were very afraid that they might stumble upon another danger. The girl also wanted to wash herself in the river, so she hid behind Hampy. The main thing is that the danger had passed, and they were able to relax a little. Now they didn't even want to move. When the sun finally rose, they emerged from the river, feeling much more confident. Once at the camp, Elin felt the full weight of the previous night and went to bed, but Qin said that she needed to change into dry clothes. Qin went to the kitchen. Although he was very tired, strong hunger did not let him sleep, and the girl needed to change clothes. Arriving at the kitchen, he saw a not very pleasant sight. One of the boars had been gutted. He even thought that some wild animals had snuck into the camp. The boar had already begun to smell unpleasantly. He then turned around and paid attention to the table on which lay the ingredients for making a torch. He wondered where she got the torch, but now he realized that she had made it from boar's fat. The guy couldn't even imagine what her face was like when she opened the belly of the boar. He would have looked at it. Suddenly he realized that his knees hurt a lot. They were red. He spent a lot of time on his feet, or rather running. You will have to take care of them for a while, and you should also avoid using the speed of the cheetah. Otherwise he may lose his legs. The guy received 7,000 for successfully escaping from a giant snake, despite the fact that he almost died on this mission. After Qin warmed up the porridge, he came to the girl and also offered to eat, but she was already fast asleep. He sat down and looked at her, and concluded that she looked so defenseless. But a few hours ago in the grove, she had been so brave when she saved him. In general, he would never have thought that she could come and save him like that, especially with such careful preparation. He lay down on the bamboo bed, covered with leaves, with the realization that he had previously looked down on her. That same night, after they had rested a little, they sat down at the table and began to discuss what had happened. It turned out that the girl had found the guy in his footsteps. She ate as if nothing had happened, as if she saved him every day and did not understand what was wrong. Qin said that that huge crushed footprint did not belong to him, but to Titanoboa. The girl couldn't believe her ears and even asked again if it was really her. After the positive answer, she began to panic a little. She was afraid that it was dangerous to stay here, but there was no need to worry yet. But there is one problem. If the snake wants to find them, then they will not survive. They need to come up with something. The girl looked at the peacefully dining panda and asked the guy about food for Hampy. How to get it now. Qin only came across her when he went deeper into the thicket. If they walked along the edge of the forest, then everything should be fine. It turns out they figured everything out, solving all the issues that arose along the way. Qin thanked Elin for everything, especially for saving him, which put her a little into a stupor. In addition, she was also embarrassed, but she was very pleased to hear gratitude and praise from the guy. Today, Qin Tian woke up at noon. Although he slept for more than half the day, his body had not fully recovered, and his knees hurt even more. To be honest, he didn't have time to rest. He needed to quickly deal with the 4 boar carcasses before they rotted. But this is not so easy to do. Even with Ellen's help, he was able to cut only 1 carcass, although she did not like the way the pieces of meat looked. It is very difficult to obtain wild boar, so Qin could not let any piece go to waste. If the entrails cannot be smoked, then they must be eaten first. He washed the bones thoroughly and set them to boil so that he could later make bone glue, and the meat would have to be smoked for 2 days. All the carcasses were processed after 3 days. They had to leave the meat to smoke outside as there was not enough space in the kitchen. In the morning the girl went out into the street, and frightenedly called him to the fire as quickly as possible. Sleepy Qin looked out of the cave, not understanding what was happening and why Ellen was screaming early in the morning. She was so furious that she even began to sweat. It turns out that someone stole their meat. This was, of course, an unexpected turn. They did not think that someone would sneak into the camp overnight. As he got closer to the scene, he saw a broken structure and the fire extinguished. The girl suggested that they were wild animals, but the guy thought that it did not look like them. The hanger of meat is too big for a wild animal to carry it away, and besides there would be a trace on the ground of how it drags the meat, but there are no such animals. Yes, and Humpy sleeps peacefully, nothing disturbed her, and animals like her are always on guard, even when they sleep. If there were an animal, she would definitely notice him. It looks like it would be better for Qin to be on duty tonight. The girl suggested keeping watch according to the old pattern, but the guy said that there was no need for it. He will sleep during the day and will be able to hold out all night without any problems. But for now the girl needs to take care of the remaining meat. It was already night. The girl was sitting on a chair not far from Qin, who had just woken up. He slept very well and asked how long he slept, because when he went to bed it was still full light. The sun has set a long time ago. It's probably about 10 in the evening. Somehow I've been sleeping for a long time this time. When he woke up, Ellen brewed mint tea so that he would wake up completely quickly. 4 boars is at least 300 kilograms of meat. They can easily eat it for the next 6 months. In addition, now they have skin and guts. If the skin is properly tanned, you can sew clothes from it. But first the guy had to find out where some of the meat they had cut had disappeared at night. He hoped that this was not the work of wild animals, otherwise it would not bode well for them. Animals that can slip into the camp and steal meat without leaving a trace, then one fine day the guys may not wake up. Qin was on duty all night. It was already dawn, but the thief still didn't show up. Very strange. If he were a thief, he also would not steal from the same place just a few hours later. Yawning, he assumed that he would have to be on duty for more than one night to identify the thief. The guy already thought that he would not come, but then he noticed someone who most likely stole the meat. It was a golden eagle, one of the most famous birds of prey, with a wingspan of up to 2 meters, one of the 10 strongest birds. Having noticed a potential victim, it dives after it. The speed can reach 300 kilometers per hour, grabs the victim by the head, and instantly kills it. Thanks to the skills of golden eagles, in Kazakhstan they have been used since ancient times as birds of prey for hunting or protecting flocks of sheep. There are only 2 ways to make friends with a golden eagle: feed it and make friends with it from birth, or tame him by starvation. In other words, do not let him sleep, bringing him to the point where he has no strength left to resist. However, it is important to take into account that there are difficulties in taming. In order to earn his trust, the trainer should also not sleep while the bird is awake. Over dinner, Qin told the girl that the thief had shown up, saying that it was a very large golden eagle. Now it became clear how it happened that after stealing their meat, he left no traces. Today the meat will already be smoked. All they have to do is put it into pots, which the girl can already start doing, but one portion needs to be left. Qin wants to catch and tame a golden eagle, and to do this they need to leave the meat on the street as it is, otherwise he might suspect something. The simplest trap looked like a bent bamboo table with a rope and a wooden hook, with meat as bait. He saw how one person caught a deer with the help of this. In theory, this bird should also work. But first, in order for everything to work exactly on time, you need to check it to know for sure. In complete silence, waiting for the trap to be triggered, the guy carefully pressed the plate where the bait would lie. He will probably grab the meat harder, and then he will definitely get caught. At this time, he continued to press the plate and pressed harder than before, causing the shutter to open. Thus, the trap worked, and after the click the guy got hit in the face with one of the shutter sticks. He decided that it was better to test this trap with another predatory animal and called Hampy. The girl was worried that she would get hurt, but with her thick skin it was unlikely that anything would happen. The panda needed to put her paw on this slab. She miscalculated the force and placed it there too powerfully, so much so that the slab broke. Qin did not expect such an outcome. It looks like he will have to tinker a little more. The girl woke up early. She would try not to nod off in broad daylight. She asked if Qin was sure that the golden eagle would come. He ate delicious meat twice. There was a very high probability that he would return. They did not have to wait long, and the bird returned again for prey. Apparently she really liked that meat. Qin jumped up when he saw him, preparing for him to fall into their trap, where they did put fish as bait. As they had planned, the bird flew up to the food and grabbed it. The trap worked successfully and the noose tightened on its paw. The girl hurried Qin, but he made it clear that it was not time yet. He needed to wait until he was exhausted. Golden eagles not only have sharp claws, but also a deadly beak that, if you are not careful, can leave you without eyes. While they were watching the bird, it tried to get out by pecking at the rope. They came close to the bird, scaring it a little. It was so huge, with a girth thicker than Elin's waist. The guy joked that she was just small, receiving in response a reproach that the bird was no smaller than his waist. But the guy didn't even say that he was big. But the girl was right. This golden eagle is really huge, much larger than he initially thought. Speaking of size, the eels he caught, the humpy, the snake, were all much larger than what was described in the system. You need to be careful with this. In some countries it is called the golden eagle, but it is not clear why they call it that, because it is gray-brown. Sometimes you don't understand what's in the minds of those who give names, and then Qin came up with the name Gray Eagle. Elin couldn't believe that he was going to call him a gray eagle. It's corny. According to Qin, this sounded very good, and he named the golden eagle a gray eagle. The bird was clearly unhappy with this name, making it clear with all its appearance. But Qin decided that he also liked this name, and at that time the girl asked how he would tame it. Just when he was talking about taming, he remembered about his seal and the system immediately came out. It said that he could only use the seal after taming, and there was only one type of taming left. Elin guessed that he was going to stay up all night for this, but it was bad for his health. But she wasn't entirely right. He didn't want to sit himself, but for them to do it together. The main point of this is to suppress wild instincts, and if in the end everything works out, then it doesn't matter how long they mess with it. But if one person does this for about a month, you need to maintain constant eye contact with him and not let him sleep. But if Qin is not alone, then the golden eagle will have no chance to rest, then it will only take a week. The day's shift was on Elin, and the guy went to bed for now. If he didn't wake up on his own by nightfall, she needed to wake him up. It was the first day of taming. It was noon. The golden eagle tried to break free and bite the rope, but was noticed and frightened by the blow of the bamboo on the ground. The girl said that she was still watching him, and he became completely insolent and tried to run away, right in front of her eyes. On the night of the second day, the guy was making a toothbrush while watching the eagle. Or he was watching the guy. It's hard to say. For successful production they gave 200 points. He spent the whole night doing it, and now it hurts his eyes. He showed it to the golden eagle and asked how he liked it, but of course, there was no answer. Qin kept waiting for him to give up, but the golden eagle still stood his ground and shook his head negatively. In the morning, on the third day, the bird no longer had much strength, and he began to fall asleep. But Hampi was watching him closely, so as soon as she saw him dozing, she immediately woke him up with a roar. She greatly frightened the golden eagle, invigorating him, while Elin tried to sew shorts for the guy from boar skin. On the fourth day, at night, the glue had been boiling for quite a long time, perhaps it could already be used. Suddenly he saw that Gray and Humpy were sleeping peacefully, and he immediately hit her on the forehead with a spoon so that she would watch more closely. The blow worked as it should. The panda jumped up and barked at the golden eagle, waking him up and scaring him a little. On the morning of the fifth day, Gray felt completely unwell, having spent so much time without sleep. He was half asleep, but a loud sound woke him up. It was Qin, knocking with bamboo sticks. He asked Gray if he was tired yet and promised to let him go when he gave up. Berkut looked at him and nodded at the last question about coming to terms with his situation. First, it's worth trying to apply the seal of the beast on the bird. This will confirm that the guys did it. He put his hand to the bird and the already familiar reaction began. The seal of the beast was applied. The golden eagle was successfully tamed, for which the guy was given 5,000 points. It turned out that it was a female. She was hungry and tired. He saw her last memories in the wild, mostly of getting food, but in the end he saw an eaglet in a cave. They managed to tame the golden eagle much faster than the girl thought. The guy assumed it was because he was worried about the chick. The girl was surprised how Qin could know about the chick, but he got out that it was just his guess. The mating season of golden eagles is in the spring and summer. This bird should already have chicks, and the guy coughed awkwardly into his fist. The girl offered to bring her chick here and raise it on her own, as Qin wanted to do, but she must first rest the money and then let Gray go. They made Qin a bandage on his arms so that the golden eagle would not injure his arm. Now, when he looked at her up close, she seemed so beautiful, and now he could stroke her. Elin also wanted to pet her, but suddenly she snapped back and almost bit the girl. This upset her. It seemed like they were taming them together, but only she couldn't touch the feathers. The guy joked that it was because the golden eagle chose him, but it was all about the press. The girl was offended by this, but she was purposeful, so she left and returned with a fish in her hands to appease the bird. After resting for one day, the guys regained their strength and are ready to go. Thanks to the seal, they found out where the chick is. It turned out that he fell out of the nest and is now clinging to survival in the mountain rock. Gray was unable to save him. It is too big for the crevice. Although Gray could find food for the chick, he was still cold at night. If it started to rain, they might not have time to save him. But even after a whole day of travel, they still did not reach the chick. They had to stop. Lime from crushed shells scattered around the camp will repel mosquitoes. It is not as effective as arsenic, but in such conditions it is the best remedy. By the time the guy finished, dinner was already ready. He could already smell the meat. The forest was too big. It would be difficult to find the eaglet. Elin believed the average speed of a person is 4 kilometers. In 10 hours they can walk 40 kilometers. But they have a lot of things, so they move slower. But even so, they have already walked 20 kilometers. Considering the size of the forest, The island should be large. But why didn't anyone find them then? Maybe it hasn't even been discovered yet. Elin noticed that he was thoughtful. But he decided to laugh it off that he was thinking about wild animals that might find them. At night, after dinner, they slept peacefully, without worrying about anything, because Hampy was always on guard. But suddenly the guy woke up because he heard the panda's alarmed roar. The guys jumped up, not understanding what was wrong with Hampy. She was looking somewhere angry, she must have felt danger. Suddenly, in the darkness behind the bushes, several pairs of eyes began to be visible, watching them. Suddenly, a large gray wolf jumped out, greatly frightening Elin. A few seconds later, several more wolves jumped out of the bushes, but Qin reassured her that they would not dare to attack in front of their pet. Humpy began to growl and try to attack first, but the guy asked him to moderate his ardor. Wolves hunt in packs, and they are also smarter than wild boars, so Elin is better off standing behind the guy, leaning on a tree. If this were a battlefield, Hampy would be a tank, and the guys would be riflemen. As soon as the tank retreated, the entire attack would fall on the riflemen. The golden eagle also cannot see anything in the dark, otherwise they would not have taken the guys by surprise. They were so scared that they forgot about the wolves' fear of fire. The pack would not dare to attack as long as they had Humpy and fire. They lit 2 torches and the guy started screaming for them to get out of here. Suddenly the guy threw a torch at them to scare them more, still trying to drive them away with a scream. And he did it. He landed next to the paw of one of them, and they became worried. He commanded Hampy to make her voice and she began to growl fiercely at them. They were lucky that the wolves got cold feet and ran away. But given how insidious they are, they could be hanging around somewhere nearby. In the morning they finally got out of the jungle. It felt as if they had entered another world. The golden eagle behaved strangely, most likely because they were already close to the nest. Probably she was impatient to see her baby. The gray one flew on, and the guys tried to keep up with her, but on the way they encountered a rock that could not be avoided. Qin helped the girl climb up as much as possible, but the mountain was so steep, it seemed to her that she could no longer do it. The guy invited her to sit at the base, along with Hampy, and he decided to go alone. The guy climbed up the rock, carefully moving his hands, trying not to fall. Once his hands slipped, if he had hesitated even for a second, he would have definitely lost his grip. Finally, he was able to climb this mountain. It turned out to be higher than he thought. It was as if he had climbed onto the roof of the world. The view was very beautiful and vast. You could see forests and fields. Suddenly he saw a volcano, the slopes of which were overgrown with trees. Perhaps it was dormant. There should be no problems with it. But next to it you can find a variety of resources. It turns out there is such a rich ecosystem. Forest, bamboo, river, and all this on one island. Gray raised her voice a little. Otherwise he seemed to have forgotten why they were here in the first place. The chick was on a very steep slope. Without special insurance, the guy had no chance to get down to it. And even if he had insurance, Qin Tian would not take such risks because he had come up with a better way. With the help of the seal, the guy could convince Gray to fly up to the chick and ask him to grab the ropes so that he could easily pull it out. The golden eagle did so, and the baby obeyed unquestioningly, and Qin was able to pull him out with ease. As he thought, the chick of this species is quite large. The little one was very happy to see its mother. Taking the chick in his hands, the guy told them that it was time to return. The mission was completed. It's true what they say, going up is scary, but going down is even more scary. He almost couldn't see where he was putting his foot. The job is done, he finally came down, but he won't do that again for any price. Wiping the sweat from his forehead and raising his head, he noticed that Elin and Humpy were nowhere to be found. At the place where she stayed, he found an inscription on the ground that she had left to look for resources. But he was so tired that he decided to wait for her on the spot. Elin returned very soon. The weather had completely deteriorated. It seemed that it was about to rain. The guy agreed that the weather was very unpredictable and he needed to leave as soon as possible. If there was heavy rain, it could cause a landslide. Suddenly, Elin shouted for Qin Tian to look at the sky and pointed her finger there. They were both stunned. There was a plane flying over an uninhabited island, where there was no one except them and wild animals. They noticed that something was wrong with it. It was smoking and falling rapidly. They needed to see what was there. Some kind of accident occurred, but no explosion was heard. Perhaps the passengers survived. The guy didn't understand where the plane could have come from on a desert island. He understood why Elin was worried. he himself felt the same. Having gotten as close as they could, they came across a cliff, so it was impossible to pass here. They shouldn't run mindlessly after the plane. It's better to stop and come up with a plan. On the ground they began to draw a plan. Where the stone is, this is them, the cross is the approximate place of the fall, and the circle is their camp. They have enough food to get to the camp, but after making a detour through the plain, there will be no food for the return trip. Even if they know approximately the crash site, it is not a fact that they will find the plane, and the longer they go, the more food they need. Elin summed up what they were getting. They needed to return to the camp for supplies, but the guy told her not to rush to conclusions. There won't be enough food for 2 people, but if the girl returns to camp and he goes looking for the plane, he'll have enough supplies. If, of course, she could return to the camp on her own, but she had no doubt that she could. At night they lit a fire, and everyone looked at the chick together. He was so cute, Elin really wanted to keep him. Moreover, they will teach him to carry out their orders, and the girl immediately began to come up with a name for him. Qin immediately came up with an idea and suggested calling it Little Eagle, but she made it clear to him with all her appearance that she was against it. She decided to name him Xiao Bai. She shouldn't give him stupid names, but the guy thought that the names of his previous pets were gorgeous, and she simply couldn't understand all their charm. The next morning, the girl showed the resin that she had found yesterday, but forgot to tell him. It can be used for many things and for torches, including. He took the resin and went looking for it. The remaining one, Qin Tian, used his skill briefly every hour to speed up the journey without harming his legs. Although the weather changed yesterday, it did not rain, but the ground in this place was wet. He ordered Gray to fly forward and see what the ladies ahead were waiting for him. It's good that the taming seal can synchronize their vision with Sarah, so he has nothing to fear. He couldn't see very well, but ahead there was something like a river or a lake. He took out a knife, just in case, and decided to check it himself. The guy came across a swamp shrouded in fog. He couldn't even think that there were such people here. Qin decided to bypass it. Of course, it will be further, but it will be much safer. Looking around, he realized that there were swamps on every side, wherever he looked. Apparently it won't work. Besides, there are clouds of mosquitoes in the swamps. Their bites itch, but if he scratches his skin, he can get an infection. You need to go. You can't stay here overnight. Stagnant water is an excellent environment for bacteria to multiply. It's better not to get drunk or get wet. It was very hot. Yesterday the sky was overcast, but it never rained. Suddenly, while the guy was resting and drinking water from a homemade bottle, the vine began to move in front of his eyes. Unexpectedly, the head of a snake appeared and was about to bite him. He only managed to cover himself with his hands, expecting a bite, but suddenly the snake disappeared, right before his eyes. It was Gray who managed to grab the poisonous viper in time, before the bite. This green snake looked exactly like a vine. The guy didn't even notice it. You need to be careful. After passing through the swamp, he finally stepped on the ground and could now use the skill. If he continues to move as fast as he does, he will be able to reach the crash site before sunset. Suddenly the ground began to blur under his foot. It was a quagmire, an unsteady place in a swamp, which was dangerous to walk on. He tried to calm himself. The more he moved, the more he drowned. He couldn't do this until he found something to grab onto. The guy lay down on the water to reduce the speed of the dive and gain time to come up with a rescue plan. At this time, Gray flew to him and he asked to give him a stick, and a longer one. He only had 2 hours left, but there were still chances. He thought about everything while he waited for help from the bird. The golden eagle brought him several sticks, one after another, of approximately the same size. He began to connect them together, because a quagmire, like quicksand, is a non-Newtonian fluid. At rest it appears solid, but a sudden change in pressure or shock makes it viscous. Therefore, it is necessary to change the pressure on the surface so that the liquid becomes solid again. Having assembled a small structure for himself, he placed it on the bog and began to climb onto it. Slowly but surely he was able to get completely out and onto his raft, so to speak. He spent a lot of energy. There was almost none left. He spent an hour getting out of this trap, and he couldn't immediately understand where the mud was and where the quagmire. He remembered one way to pass safely. The leader of the Condor heroes passed through quicksand. From the same structure, he had to select 8 dry sticks for his plan. Using a knife, he carefully trimmed them and tied them in 4s, then tied them to his legs. He tried them out immediately, stood with one foot on the quagmire, and, indeed, he could calmly stand on it. It works like a ski, increasing the footprint and distributing the weight, allowing it to glide over bog surfaces. Ahead there will be a plane crash site. Perhaps he will even meet one of the crew in the forest. At this time, at the crash site, the English girl pilot came to her senses, not understanding where she was. She immediately remembered that during the flight she encountered a storm, and then the plane lost control and fell into turbulence. Thank God, by some miracle she managed to find a place to land before she crashed. Looking at the propeller, she realized that this was very bad. Well, at least she herself was not injured. Looking around, she noticed a swamp. It was similar to the one she had seen while traveling in South America, but she was not sure that people lived here. At first she started calling someone, but then she got upset, because where would people come from on a desert island? The sun is setting, so she will have to spend the night in the cabin, the girl thought, and began to climb back. The guy was already coming closer. He was also shouting, hoping to find someone from the crew. So much time has passed since the fall. If the crew members are injured, then they could be in danger. Suddenly he heard the gray one giving him information about a large white bird lying nearby. Having reached the scene of the accident, he began to scream again, hoping that he would hear an answer to this. There are no traces of blood. Apparently the crew members must have left for good, or to search. The plane looks new, but the model is old. It looks like there are no communication devices on it. Suddenly he heard a human voice behind him. It was an airplane pilot running towards him, screaming. She screamed for him to run. Apparently she was being chased by crocodiles and she was very scared. The marsh crocodile, or major, is an excellent swimmer. With the help of its tail and hind legs it can reach speeds of up to 32 kilometers per hour. It is useless to try to deal with them on land. They will definitely win. The guy, sitting on the plane, extended his hand to her and shouted for her to give hers. With his help, she managed to jump onto the plane, just at the moment when there was very little left from the crocodile's mouth to her leg. But since she did it without stopping, with a running start, she fell inside. The girl fell right on top of Qin, crushing him with her chest, out of breath and sweating. He looked at her with surprised eyes. She seemed so beautiful to the guy. The girl tried to get up, looking at the crocodiles at the same time, but did not calculate the distance and accidentally pressed her chest into the guy's face, after which she apologized. Getting up and seeing the guy's worried look, she asked what happened. In response, he immediately pointed to the tail of the plane. By this time, they were already surrounded by crocodiles. There were about 5 of them. He didn't understand why they were so aggressive. They even rushed at the plane. It was unlikely that he would be able to wait out when they left. Well, of course, stone arrows are not strong enough to wound them. Crocodile skin is strong and thick. He thought that he should aim for their eyes. Perhaps this could somehow scare them away. But the target was too small, and also mobile. It was almost impossible to hit. The guy couldn't hurt them, because of his strong skin and not hitting the target accurately, but only teased them more. He stood scared and focused, trying to find a way out of this situation, because another 15 minutes, and they would destroy this plane. Qin realized that it was time to use the help of the system, in case there was something suitable there. He didn't buy anything for several days and he had accumulated about 12,500 points. This is enough to buy new skills. In this case, you should choose the Sagittarius blessing. The other skills are not suitable. But then the girl wanted to set them on fire with the help of alcohol. The guy stopped her, saying that this water is a very important thing, in broken English. He only asked her for a lighter, calling it fire, also in bad English. His broken English does little to help communicate, but he can't let her spill the valuable alcohol. Continuing to climb the system, he thought that he could definitely handle it himself, and bought the skill that he had chosen. He also activated it, and, as usual, the skill was downloaded into the guy's brain. At first he didn't understand a little. For some reason he didn't feel anything this time, unlike the cheetah's speed skill. Maybe it was some kind of fake. In general, there was no time to think about it, because the magicians began to attack the plane. Looking at her, he hoped she wouldn't get into trouble while he dealt with the crocodiles. The guy coated the arrowheads with resin that Elin gave him, and then set it on fire. Looking at the animals, he realized what the skill was. Everything became like a cartoon shooter. This scale must have indicated the direction and required tension, and the wind scale reflects the appropriate angle for shooting. First he must adjust everything and then shoot, There is little time left as the animals continue to advance. One at a time, he easily hit each of the 4 crocodiles in the eye. At this time, the girl helped him as best she could, setting fire and giving him arrows. After that, he hit 3 more. They were in great pain, and they hardly wanted to attack them. Suddenly, all the crocodiles turned around, not even wounded, and began to quickly leave, so as not to get caught again. The girl happily raised her hands up and shouted that he was her hero, and at that time Qin introduced himself and asked her name. She introduced herself as Jessica Hathaway, and at the same time asked where they were and if there was anyone else here with the guy. But the guy didn't understand anything. He didn't know English well, and she spoke too quickly. She started asking what language he knew, but it was unlikely Chinese. They usually all had ponytails. He wanted to ask her for her phone number, but there was no point in asking her because there were no phone lines here. He scratched his head, realizing that the conversation was going very slowly due to the difference in languages. Night had already fallen. For illumination, they placed a torch on the nose of the plane, and she shared canned food with him. She began to open canned food with the most ordinary, old opener. He had not seen them open like that for a long time. It seemed to look edible, but when he looked at the expiration date, he was surprised and asked her about it. If only someone could explain to him how to tell her in English that her canned food is expired. She ate them calmly, telling him not to worry, it was just stew. He tried it, it tasted nothing, maybe it was not the production date. It was a long day, and right after dinner they felt sleepy. Jessica must have been very tired after the accident. Wild animals will not get on the plane, so you can spend the night here on the plane. It was already morning. Qin woke up, but did not see Jessica next to him. Looking out of the plane, he saw her nearby and she immediately wished him good morning. In her bag there was an iron pot and a glass, some kind of Doraemon magic bag. Instead of drinking empty boiling water, they decided to treat themselves to boar broth, which is much more nutritious. After eating boar broth, Jessica and Qin Tian fully recovered. The guy still didn't understand her well because of his English. The guy was sure that Elin would be able to communicate with her, so he invited her to the camp, which she was very happy about. It's a pity that he doesn't have normal tools with him. Some parts of the plane would be useful. Suddenly Gray returned, scaring the girl. While she was shouting for him to be careful, the guy simply whistled, because why should he be afraid of his pet? He calmed her down and told her not to worry, and at that time Gray sat on his hand. Suddenly a thick fog appeared, although it was now midday, and it was unclear where it came from. Even Soraya is of no use in such conditions. You need to be careful. They didn't walk very far, but Jessica asked to stop. He agreed to rest a little. The girl sat down on the ground and began to drink water. She looked unwell and felt the same. While the guy was wondering whether the fog that had shrouded the entire area would clear, the girl disappeared from sight. Turning around, he noticed that she had passed out and was lying on the ground. He did not understand what had happened, but suddenly a terrible weakness fell on him and his head began to spin. He fell on all fours, closer to the ground, thinking that there was something in this fog. Qin again tried to call the girl and find out if she could hear him. He urgently needed to come up with some way out. Although she was still unconscious, it seemed that her condition was not too bad, and it seemed as if he had been relieved. Maybe with Jessica's lighter he can figure out what's in the fog. Luckily, the skill still works and he can get where he needs to go on the first try. Suddenly an explosion occurred in the place where the guy threw the lighter. He basically thought so. It seems that the methane in this fog is to blame. It is a little lighter than air, so when they were closer to the ground they felt better. But leaving everything as it is not the best option. You need to wake up Jessica and get out of here quickly. The guy started looking for something in the girl's things, apologizing for rummaging through her things without asking. But he did it for a good purpose. He needed to find something to save their lives. There was a metal spoon, a tent, a sleeping bag, and other things, but most of all he needed something else. He needed a first aid kit, but unfortunately, he did not understand the English names of the medicines that were there. Surprisingly, he found the battery. This was the salvation of Qin and Jessica. To begin with, he needs a piece of bamboo with water, a syringe, and 4 tube, a pencil lead and an iron spoon. The lead must be connected to the cathode of the power source and covered with the body of the syringe with a tube. An iron spoon is connected to the anode to form a closed circuit under water. Next, put the spoon and stylus into a bamboo tube with water and turn on the power. When bubbles appear, this is successful electrolysis. Under the influence of electricity, water decomposes. There will be oxygen at the cathode, and hydrogen at the anode. This is the simplest way to produce oxygen. All that remains is to supply oxygen directly to her using a tube from N4 and wait. His plan worked. The girl jumped up sharply, not understanding what happened to her, and why she passed out in the first place. The guy explained that there was methane around them, which is why she suddenly became weak. They will have to take turns breathing oxygen from the tube. By the time it awakens, there is not much charge left. They need to get out of the swamps before it runs out. Having gone the whole way, handing over the oxygen tube, they had one last push left. Having emerged from the methane fog, they stopped for a while to get used to the air. After this horror, the air seemed so fresh that it was difficult for them to breathe, but in a good way. The day was already approaching evening. Weakened by the influence of biogas, they found a place to rest, and will return to the camp tomorrow.